Welcome to the first week of this year's In Times Like These recap. Now let's get into this. Starting with our favorite neighborhood drug dealer, Zeke Franklin. The last time we saw Zeke, it was New Year's Eve and his girlfriend, Nichelle Torres, caught him on the phone with Yvette Mitchell, admitting to him and Yvette hooking up. Zeke tries to play it off like he and Yvette only hooked up before he and Nichelle got together, but Nichelle doesn't buy it, giving him one chance to tell the truth, asking Zeke if the drugs that were found in his bag belonged to him. Zeke admits to it and finally admits that he's been selling those drugs. Nichelle tries telling Zeke that he could have done things the legal way, but Zeke tells Nichelle how much he craves for the life she has. But in order for someone like him to make it, he has to play dirty. Nichelle, unaware that her father Devante is in cahoots with a drug queen, tells Zeke that he could have done things the legal way. Zeke almost lets it slip that her family isn't so innocent, but he doesn't, telling Nichelle that he loves her. Nichelle claps back that Zeke doesn't love her enough to stay faithful and truthful. Zeke tells Nichelle how he felt like he couldn't control himself, explaining that after he discovered X-rated videos at 11, sex is something he feels he can't live without. Nichelle tells Zeke that he can live without her, telling him that they're over, leaving them both in tears. We'll get back to Zeke's ratchet adventures pretty soon. Nichelle's younger sister Yulissa is hanging out with the Dorvals. Not only is it New Year's Day, but it's also Haitian Independence Day. Shout out to all my fellow Zoes who are watching this series. Shelley Dorval comes in with soup jumu, offering some to Yulissa, unaware that Yulissa is battling an eating disorder. Yulissa reluctantly declines, but when the Dorvals, except for Vanessa, pretty much tells her don't knock it till you try it, Yulissa feels so guilty she ends up crying, eventually revealing to the Dorvals about what she's been struggling with. The Dorvals, her new spiritual family in Christ, assure Yulissa that they'll stand by her side as she fights her battles with her eating disorder. Max Russo gets a text from an anonymous person named Yvette's Avenger, aka Keith Burke, wishing Max nothing but misery for 2024. When his father Gianni enters the room, he keeps quiet about the message, expressing to his father how he doesn't want to go to school after the break is over since people haven't forgotten about Yvette's allegations. Gianni tells his son that since Devante Torres was revealed to be the person who took Elvira's life, he feels like Max won't get too much hate towards him, asking his son if people have been bothering him. This causes Max to lie and say that no one has. Then Gianni tells his son that the only battle he has to face is getting ready for the trial. Max tells his father to state how there are other battles he needs to face. Confused, Gianni asks Max what other battles he has to face. Gianni is reminded of Ben's alcoholism and that Heidi is out of the house, causing Max to question if Gianni will divorce Heidi. In order to calm Max down, Gianni encourages his son not to take on other people's burdens and to just focus on getting through his own issues. Max reminds Gianni how that wasn't a solid answer, but Gianni disagrees. Zeke sees Nichelle at school, but she walks away from him. Then he runs into Yvette. She reminds Zeke how he didn't do as she asked. In response, Zeke tells Yvette how Nichelle heard him on the phone, admitting that they hooked up. This surprises Yvette as she begins to tell Zeke how sorry she is, but he's not willing to hear it. He goes on to tell Yvette that if she had only left him alone and didn't call, then he and Nichelle would still be together. Yvette sees that he really cared about Nichelle. She begins to wonder if Nichelle no longer believes that Max forced himself on her. Zeke doesn't know, but tells Yvette that if the whole school finds out about the two of them, then she better not accuse him of anything. Yvette promises not to do anything like that to Zeke, stating how she sees how much she's already hurt him. This causes Zeke to ask her if Max really did force himself on her. She continues to claim that he did, stating how that event, and with her parents' issues, she wasn't thinking clearly on New Year's Eve, telling him that she can speak with Nichelle for him. Zeke feels like that would only make things worse. She begins to ask what could help him feel better. Knowing that Zeke can't keep his hands in his pants, he hooks up with Yvette in the school basement again. On the beachfront of Theodosius' palace, Devante is exposed as the person who took Elvira Russo's life all of those years ago. Because of the diary, Ben knows that Elvira wanted to get back with Udell Mitchell and end her affair with Devante. He also knows how Devante wanted to leave Isabel for Elvira, so it makes perfect sense for Devante to be the one who took Elvira's life. Devante flashes back to the day he told Elvira that he would leave Isabel for her. But since Elvira declined, Devante grabbed a knife and ended his lover's life back in 2003. Isabel is in disbelief as the Russos are furious that Devante seduced Elvira and then ended up taking her life. Devante tells everyone not to believe Ben, who was 5 and has a history of drug use. Ben reminds everyone how they were all at Theodosius' palace the day that Elvira lost her life, asking them if they noticed Devante there throughout the entire party. Wanda speaks up, telling everyone how she remembered Devante stepping out, not realizing that he stepped out to take her best friend's life. Lorenzo Russo demands that Finnegan Burke arrest Devante, which he does. Clarice Russo is at the family estate as she thinks back to the last day she spoke with Elvira, where Elvira wants to make things right with those around her. When her husband Lorenzo snaps her back to present day, she tells her husband how she's relieved to know who took their daughter's life, but knows that they have to fight to get justice. Lorenzo is positive that Devante will pay for the crime that he committed, but she reminds Lorenzo how there's no physical evidence against Devante. He reminds his wife how Ben and Wanda can speak against Devante and that Devante has no alibi. Clarice declares how she hopes that Devante doesn't make bail, fearing that if she lays eyes on him again, then she would take his life herself, comforted by Lorenzo. Ben is drinking in his condo, then he gets an unexpected visit from Quinlan Franklin. He reminds Quinlan how she's not supposed to be there. She tells him how she wanted to check up on him. Quinlan tells Ben how she knows that Devante was arrested for taking Elvira's life. He asks what that has to do with her, stating how he solved the mystery himself without her help. She agrees, but reminds him how they did work together to make it this far, but also knows that he must have a mix of emotions. Ben tells Quinlan how the only feeling he has is annoyance, telling Quinlan to leave. Concerned, Quinlan tells Ben how she doesn't feel comfortable leaving him in that state, but he tells her that he doesn't care how she feels after she had an affair with his father Gianni. Since the mystery of Elvira's murder has been solved, Ben tells Quinlan how she can pretend like they never worked together in the first place, explaining how she has enough information to progress in her career and to keep her drug-dealing brother out of prison. Sorrowfully, Quinlan decides to walk off. Wanda Mitchell arrives at the family estate, upsetting her husband Udell. She understands that she wasn't allowed back home, telling Udell how she came by to apologize. He states how he heard her apologies already, but she apologizes for protecting the very man that took Elvira away from them. Udell reminds Wanda how she claimed she wasn't protecting Devante. After he was exposed, she realized that she protected him more than she thought and states how she'll never forgive herself for that. In response, Udell tells Wanda how he hopes she doesn't forgive herself, expressing how unsure he is that he'll be able to forgive her. She understands that, hoping that he understands that she would have never stayed quiet if she had the slightest idea that Devante took Elvira from them. Frustrated, Udell points out that if Wanda didn't keep the secret from the beginning, then Elvira's case would have been solved years ago, adding how Elvira could have still been alive and that there could have been more evidence to convict Devante. She questions if Udell thinks that Devante will get away with his crimes. Udell replies that Devante is not admitting to what he did and how that means there will be a trial, stating how there's a chance that Elvira might not get justice, telling Wanda how she has a part to play in that if that happens. Wanda tells him how she's willing to testify in court, but Udell states how she'll only be stating how Devante seduced Elvira. He goes on to tell Wanda to leave, telling her that he hopes her secrets don't cause more damage than they already have. Isabel is still reeling over the revelation of Devante being exposed as a person who took Elvira's life. To her surprise, her daughters Nichelle and Yulissa enter the room, as Nichelle is upset that Yulissa believes that their father is guilty, while Nichelle believes that Devante is innocent. As the girls continue to go back and forth, Isabel snaps at them to stop, telling Nichelle to accept the fact how her father isn't the man she thinks he is. Suddenly, Devante shows up, asking his wife what sort of man she thinks he is. Dr. Terry Burke arrives at Theodosius' palace in Finnegan's room to tell her husband that she wants full custody of their son, Keeve, claiming that she doesn't want Keeve to pick up on Finnegan's bad habits, unaware that Keeve has bad, creepy habits of his own. This request angers Finnegan, who isn't willing to give up their son. Terry goes on about how she can expose Finnegan as the adulterer that he is. He tells Terry that he'll agree to give her the house, stating how bad it will look to have her kicked out since he cheated, but states how she'll look like a bitter ex-wife taking their son away from his father. Terry states that it sounds like a judge will have to make the decision. Wanda brings flowers to Elvira's grave, admitting how it's been a while since she visited her, stating how she's been trying to juggle motherhood, marriage life, and the business, but admits that her world is falling apart, wishing that Elvira was still a part of it, even if Wanda felt like Udell would have chosen Elvira over her. Wanda apologizes to Elvira for protecting Devante. Wanda admits how she was afraid of losing their friendship if she told anyone that Devante was a man Elvira had an affair with, even afraid of herself, knowing that she was growing feelings for Udell, something that she was certain that Elvira would have never forgiven her for. Leaving the flowers at Elvira's grave, Wanda tells her friend how she'll do her best to visit her more often, that she misses her, and that she loves her. Nichelle is ecstatic that her father made bail, but Isabel and Yulissa don't look too fond of Devante showing up. Yulissa leaves the room, then Isabel asks Nichelle to do the same and allow her to speak with Devante alone. While Nichelle leaves, Devante tells Isabel how he didn't get a call from her. She tells Devante how she needed time to process everything that went down. In response, Devante states how she's done nothing to try and persuade their daughter Yulissa of his innocence. Then Isabel states that she hasn't convinced Yulissa otherwise because their daughter has a point. He cheated on Isabel with Elvira, then wanted to leave his wife for his lover. Devante admits to cheating on Isabel with Elvira, but claims that he would have never ended their marriage. Isabel doesn't buy it, feeling like he only stayed with her just because she would have him, stating how much she sacrificed to keep them together, and we'll discuss that more in depth later on. Isabel admits to having a one-night stand with Isidore Russo over 20 years ago. He tells Isabel that as long as she's willing to forgive him, then he's willing to forgive her. Isabel tells her husband how she's not willing to forgive him, adding that she'll be leaving and taking the girls with her. Devante sees that Nichelle wouldn't agree to go and feels like Yulissa will come running back. Isabel responds how Nichelle will only temporarily stay with Devante, certain that Devante will go to prison. Isabel stays at another hotel as she dreams about the young man, who is the image of the child she could have had with Isidore. The young man asks Isabel if it was worth it to sacrifice him in order to keep her marriage to a man who didn't value her, telling Isabel that from the looks of it, her marriage is already over. He goes on to tell Isabel that he pities her for getting rid of the only child she could have had with the only man she ever loved. She denies being in love with Isidore. Then he reminds Isabel how he's in her head, knowing her true thoughts and desires. The young man goes on to express how Isabel stayed married to Devante out of loyalty, not love. He adds how she gave Devante 2 more children out of guilt and working hard to love him, but could never love him as much as she loved Isidore. Isabel begins to apologize for terminating the pregnancy, but the young man tells Isabel how for so long he wanted to hear an apology, but hopes that she regrets her choice for as long as she lives. Isabel is awakened by the door knock and comes face to face with Isidore. Adaku meets with Devante at Theodosius' palace, who is dealing with a mixed amount of people coming into the hotel and leaving, thanking her for getting the lawyer to bail him out, then tells her how he won't need that specific service since he needs a lawyer that will help him clean up his image. Devante admits to Adaku that he did take Elvira's life, asking her to make sure that the news network she's in charge of, GNP, doesn't paint him as a monster. Adaku tells Devante how that would give her news network the side-eye. He reminds Adaku that her news network is a front, reminding her that if he goes down for taking Elvira's life, then she won't be able to use the beachfront to push her product. Adaku begins to ask Devante what lawyer he plans to get. We find out that answer quickly when Harley is approached by Devante. Yulissa runs into Nichelle at school as Nichelle tells her younger sister how disappointed she is that Yulissa and their mother could abandon Devante when he needs them the most. This frustrates Yulissa, stating how Devante should have thought about that before he took Elvira Russo's life. Once again, Nichelle asks Yulissa how she's so sure that Devante did what he's accused of. Yulissa reminds Nichelle that Devante had 20 years to get rid of any physical evidence, but how none of that could erase the motive he had to take Elvira's life, telling her sister how she can't be so stupid. Offended, Nichelle is adamant that she's not stupid and that she's not willing to take the words of others over their father, stating how she's also not willing to stop loving their father. Yulissa makes it clear that she never stopped loving their father, stating how much it hurts her to know that their father did something so awful. She goes on to say how she prays for her father to give his life to Christ and that he admits to his wrongdoing. Nichelle feels like Devante doesn't need prayer when we all know he does, asking Yulissa if she and Isabel understand how they're tearing this family apart, stating how their older brother Pacho started it, believing that Isabel and Yulissa will follow Pacho's lead. Yulissa tells Nichelle that if anyone is tearing their family apart, then that's their father, rushing away from her sister. In the bathroom, Yulissa struggles on whether to force herself to throw up or not, then calls her brother Pacho, telling him how everything is falling apart and needs him to come back home. In an undisclosed location, we finally get to meet Pacho. Well, some of him. Welcome to the second week of this year's In Times Like These recap. Now let's get into this. Starting with Vanessa Dorval, who notices her best friend Yulissa Torres coming out of the school bathroom, asking if she's okay. Yulissa assumes that Vanessa believes that she was trying to force herself to throw up, then admits that she wanted to, but stopped herself by calling her older brother Pacho. When Vanessa asks if Pacho answered, Yulissa replies that he did, but reveals that when she pleaded with him to come back home, he just ended the call. Vanessa expresses how sorry she is to hear that. Then Yulissa cries into her friend's arms. Zeke Franklin runs into his ex, Nichelle Torres, but as she tries to avoid him, he tells Nichelle that she can't avoid him forever. Nichelle disagrees, telling Zeke that they said all they needed to say on New Year's. He states how he wants to know how she's doing after finding out about her dad taking Elvira Russo's life. Offended, Nichelle tells Zeke that she can't believe he would say something like that, especially since he's a drug dealer. He goes on about how she doesn't know her father like she thinks. Then she assumes that he's talking about how Devante cheated on Isabel, telling him how her father just made a mistake. Zeke questions why she can forgive her father but can't forgive him. She reminds Zeke how she defended him against her entire family when they were right about him the entire time and that he made her feel like a fool. Zeke tells Nichelle how that was never his intention. Nichelle just doesn't care, telling Zeke that all he had to do was be honest and faithful, telling him how he couldn't even do that. He promises to be faithful if she gives him another chance. She reminds Zeke that he's still a drug dealer, questioning if he even ran back to a vet. When Zeke is unable to answer that question, because he did, Nichelle tells Zeke how sick he is, then walks off. Isidore Russo meets with Isabel Torres outside of her hotel room, telling her that he wanted to check up on her after her husband Devante was revealed for taking Elvira's life. She asks Isidore how he thinks she's doing after finding out that the past 20 years has been a lie. Isidore expresses his sympathies, especially since he's also angry at the fact that Devante took his sister's life. Isabel remembers that Devante did Essador and the Russo family wrong, expressing her condolences. Essador appreciates it, then tells Isabel how he knows that she can't stay at the hotel for long, wondering what her next move is. Isabel states how she'll have to find a place to live in. Until then, Essador offers to allow Isabel to stay at the Russo estate, but she refuses the offer. When Devante Torres confronts Harley Drake at Theodosius' palace, she questions why she would ever offer legal advice to the very man who robbed her son of the chance of knowing his aunt. Devante claims to be innocent, but Harley states that the Russos think differently. Devante reminds her that as a lawyer, she should understand that everyone is innocent until proven guilty, adding that with her as his lawyer, it would help the public realize that. Since she's trying to have a closer bond with her son, Harley refuses to help Devante. She adds that if she wanted to defend him, then the Russos would never forgive her if she became his lawyer and let the person who took Elvira's life go free. When Harley walks off, Devante makes a call to Adaku, asking her for a favor. Max Russo is on the phone at Theodosius' palace as he visits his mother Heidi, but sees hateful texts from Yvette's Avenger, aka Keith Burke. When Heidi greets her son, she notices how troubled Max looks. After asking about it, he tells his mother how he's just feeling troubled about her staying in the same hotel owned by the man who took Elvira's life. Heidi assures her son that she'll be leaving the hotel soon. This response causes Max to question if Heidi will be coming back home. She tells Max how she would love to come back home, but states how Gianni isn't having that. Max begins to question if she and Gianni will have a divorce. When Heidi replies that Max doesn't have to worry about that, he brings up the fact that Gianni told him the same thing, frustrated that he can't get a solid answer. Heidi apologizes to her son for stressing him out, telling him that she can't give him a solid answer, especially since she and Gianni hurt each other terribly. Max begins to ask his mother if she ever really loved Gianni. Heidi responds that she wouldn't have married him if she didn't, not caring what family Gianni was a part of. This causes Max to question why Heidi cheated on Gianni to begin with. Heidi admits that she was foolish and saw something in Finnegan Burke which she felt like Gianni didn't have, but states how that was only a facade which she fell for, apologizing to Max that it made his life worse. Max just goes on to say how he's now at a point where he's unsure if he'll lose his freedom and if his parents will stay married. Finnegan Burke meets with Harley Drake at Theodosius' palace, asking her for help with keeping the custody of his son. She reminds Finnegan how much trouble he's caused for the Russos. That's when Finnegan reminds Harley that she's no longer a part of that family and that his affair had nothing to do with her or her son. Harley agrees, then asks Finnegan why he chose her. Finnegan states how Terry has gotten representation from Udell Mitchell and needed to be represented by someone just as good. Harley corrects him by saying that she's not just as good, but better than Udell Mitchell. Finnegan challenges her to prove it by accepting to take his case. Harley agrees to do it, which Finnegan appreciates. Even though she agrees to be his lawyer, she reminds Finnegan that he could have avoided all of this trouble if he were only faithful, pointing out how it will be a challenge to help him win full custody. Finnegan states how he doesn't want full custody but joint custody, going on about how he loves his son, but with his wife divorcing him and with his affair with Heidi being over, he has needs. Harley tells Finnegan how he needs to keep that to himself. He agrees to do so, then when Harley is about to leave, she tells Finnegan how she'll be in touch. Finnegan responds by telling her how he'll be looking forward to it, making Harley blush. Is there something going on between those two? Ulissa arrives at the hotel room after school, asking her mom how long they'll be staying in the hotel. Isabel assures her daughter how it won't be long, explaining how she plans to get a place of their own. This is when Ulissa states how she doesn't want to move out of Theodosius' palace permanently. Isabel begins to question if she wants to move back in with Devante. Ulissa explains to her mother how she doesn't, but doesn't want to leave Theodosius' palace if he goes to prison. Isabel tells her daughter how she doesn't have the experience of running a hotel, making Ulissa question if Isabel plans to sell the hotel. Isabel reminds her daughter how Devante owns most of the hotel, stating how he'll have to be the one to decide who the hotel goes to, assuring Yulissa how Devante still loves her and Nichelle, certain that he'll hand the hotel over to them. Yulissa suggests that she should just get someone to manage the hotel until Yulissa or Nichelle are able to. Isabel questions if running the hotel is something that Yulissa wants. After thinking a lot about it, Yulissa reminds Isabel how the hotel has been in their family for generations and can't imagine it being run by anyone else, causing Isabel to think things through. Jeremiah Dorval speaks with his wife Shelley and his father Raymond about how he's getting ready to tell Devante how he won't be able to do any work for him. Just as he says this to his family, Devante arrives at the estate. Jeremiah asks Devante what he's doing at his house. Devante begins to tell Jeremiah how he hopes he doesn't believe the lies that the media is saying about him. Jeremiah tells Devante how he can't be associated with anyone charged with a crime as serious as his. Devante reminds him of what he did for him when Gianni trashed his business. Shelley reminds Devante how he only ended up making things worse for them, stating how they should have dropped him then and there. Jeremiah adds how Devante has shown him what sort of person he is, asking Devante to leave. Devante warns the Dorvals how they're making a huge mistake. This causes Shelley to ask Jeremiah if Devante will come after them. Jeremiah assures his wife not to worry about that. Later on, Alan Russo is walking on campus, then gets beat up by a masked man. Wanda Mitchell and her husband Udell meet in Owen Grant's office, telling him how she'll have to leave Theodosius' palace since she can't allow herself to be in the same building as Devante, once again asking Udell if she can come back home. Before Udell has a chance to answer, Owen comes in, telling the couple how the trial for Yvette's case will begin the following month. The couple thanks him, then he tells them how he'll have everything prepared to get Max Russo to pay for what he's done. Udell and Wanda assure Owen that they'll make sure to stand by his side if Heidi tries to retaliate. Owen appreciates this, then Udell walks off, making Owen notice that the two didn't walk in together. Wanda states how she has a business to run, but Owen wonders if that's everything. She claims that it is, and he informs Wanda that even though he's an ADA, she can go to him whenever she needs someone to talk to. Wanda appreciates this, then she walks out, with Owen still eyeing her. Gianni Russo arrives at his son Ben's condo where Ben is drunk. Gianni tells his son that he does want to apologize for the hurt he caused him with his relationship with Quinlan. Ben tells his father how apologizing won't erase what happened. This is something that Gianni agrees with, asking his son if he loves Quinlan. Upon hearing this question, Ben begins to ask his father the same thing. Gianni admits to his son how he has grown to have deep feelings for her, explaining how he wasn't able to explore those feelings since Quinlan broke off their affair. When Ben hears this, he asks his father if he wants his blessing in pursuing Quinlan. All Gianni wants to know is that Ben won't try to get in the way if he decides to pursue Quinlan. Immediately, Ben scoffs at his father's statement, telling his father that if he wants Quinlan, then he can have her, stating how the family will look down on him for choosing Quinlan over Heidi. Gianni tells Ben how he wishes that it didn't have to come to this. Then Ben tells Gianni how he and Quinlan deserve each other. Once Gianni leaves, Ben is in shambles. Quinlan Franklin enters Adaku's office at Global News Press. Adaku tells Quinlan how impressed she is by the outcome of Elvira Russo's documentary. After Quinlan expresses how much she appreciates the compliment, Adaku states how she's certain that Quinlan would have a desire to interview Devante Torres after his arrest. Upon hearing this, Quinlan wonders if the network was able to secure her with a one-on-one interview with Devante. Adaku tells Quinlan that they have, which Quinlan is excited for, but is caught off guard when Adaku tells Quinlan not to go too hard on him. Quinlan is confused by this request, stating how it's been 20 years since Elvira was killed and there has finally been an arrest. Even though Devante has been arrested, Adaku reminds Quinlan that he hasn't been convicted, wanting Quinlan to be fair by not going too hard on him, reminding her that Devante is innocent until proven guilty. Quinlan reminds Adaku that Devante seduced Elvira when she was 17 and he was already a married man, stating how a lot of people will look at him funny about that. Adaku tells Quinlan that he still deserves a fair trial as well as a fair interview, stating how the questions will be reviewed before the interview. She goes on to ask Quinlan if she can agree to these terms or if she'll have to choose another reporter. Quinlan agrees to do this. Then when Adaku dismisses Quinlan, the reporter feels like things are a bit suspicious. Harley, Isidore, and his parents Lorenzo and Clarice rush to the hospital, seeing that Alan is bruised up. Worried, the family asks Alan who did this to him. He tells his family how he has no idea, explaining how he was on his way to his car when a masked man just attacked him. Didn't rob him, but just started pounding on him. From the sound of it, they see that it was a targeted attack. Alan tells his family how he's still living. Even though Alan survived, his family states how that doesn't mean that he's no longer a target. Alan begins to ask his family if this means he can get his own personal bodyguard. His family states that they would be willing to do that if that keeps him safe. As for Isidore, he feels like that won't be necessary, stating how the person will be stupid to try and come after Alan again. When Harley walks out of the hospital room, she runs into Devante. Heidi arrives at the Russo estate, informed by her husband Gianni about Alan's attack. He tells Heidi how he called her over to discuss the future of their marriage. Heidi is relieved, telling Gianni how sorry she is that she ever allowed Finnegan in her life, stating that the time away made her realize that she was living some sort of fantasy in Finnegan when she should have focused on her family. Thankful that Gianni is willing to give her another chance. Gianni states that he won't give Heidi another chance, but in fact, he wants a divorce. Shocked, Heidi reminds Gianni how she apologized, but he tells his wife how apologizing won't erase the damage she caused. Angered, Heidi points out that Gianni cheated on her too, when she was trying to work on their marriage. Gianni points out that Heidi cheated on him more. Even though Heidi understands that, she states how she's willing to look past that and work things out, reminding Gianni how Max needs them by his side. This is something which Gianni agrees with, but tells Heidi that they don't need to stay married in order for that to happen. In disbelief, Heidi tells Gianni how she can't believe that he's leaving her for, and I quote, his toddler whore. Gianni points out that Quinlan is a grown woman, but Heidi responds that Quinlan is a grown woman old enough to be his daughter. She adds how Ben fell for Quinlan, warning Gianni that if he pursues her, that it will cause Ben to keep pursuing the bottle. Heidi tells Gianni that he's delusional, then leaves, telling her husband, or maybe former husband, how she can't believe their marriage is ending because of his midlife crisis. Wanda and Udell tell Yvette when the trial will start, then states how even though she might feel nervous, they'll be right by her side. Yvette tells her parents how she would feel less nervous if Wanda is allowed back at the estate. Before Wanda has a chance to respond, Udell tells Yvette how Wanda won't be able to. Of course, Yvette questions why. Udell states how that's something she shouldn't have to concern herself with. Udell asks Yvette to let him have some time alone with Wanda. She tells Udell how Yvette is struggling, urging Udell to let her come back home. Udell tells Wanda not to use their daughter to get him to change his mind. Wanda expresses how that's not what she's trying to do, telling him that she wants to make things work out between the two of them just as much as Yvette does. Frustrated, Udell tells Wanda how she should have thought about that when she decided to let him put a ring on his finger without telling her that Devante was the reason why his relationship ended with Elvira. That's when Wanda pleads with Udell not to let Devante be the reason their marriage ends. Udell asks Wanda to leave, then she does, calling Owen, telling him that she could use a friend. Harley asks Devante what he's doing at the hospital, then asks him how he knows about Alan. Devante tells Harley that he took a wild guess. Clearly, she doesn't buy that, certain that he had something to do with it. Devante states that he's innocent, then she asks him how he even knows about it. He states how he just walked in and for all she knows, he overheard someone talking about Alan. She still doesn't buy it, asking him why he had her son beat up. Speaking hypothetically, Devante tells Harley that he wants to send a message. Harley asks Devante what sort of message he is trying to send. Devante tells her that if he took Elvira's life like everyone thinks, then he's more than capable of taking down another Russo. Angered, Harley tells Devontae to stay away from her son. Devontae claims that he would never hurt Alan, but hypothetically tells her that if he's a monster like everyone thinks, then he might as well go down taking as many people with him as possible. When Harley threatens to report him to the police, Devontae asks how she's going to prove it, stating how she'll only look stupid. She begins to ask Devontae what he wants. Devontae tells Harley how she knows what he wants. Knowing that he's referring to her being his lawyer, she asks Devontae if he thinks that the Russos will look at him suspiciously if she defends him right after Alan was attacked. He answers how he doesn't think so, since she has to prove to everyone that he's innocent. Harley wonders if Devontae would really harm Alan if he doesn't get him off. Devontae tells Harley that if he's such a monster like she thinks he is, then he tells her how she must also assume that he has connections to some very powerful, dangerous people. Angrily, Harley agrees to be his lawyer. Quinlan arrives outside of Isabel's hotel room, then Isabel asks her what she wants and how she found her. She introduces herself as Zeke's older sister, then Isabel tells Quinlan how she knows who she is, also knowing that Quinlan is a news reporter and that Zeke and Nichelle broke up. Quinlan, unaware of the breakup, assures Isabel that she didn't come to get a statement, telling Isabel that she does have a question about her husband, asking if she knows if Adaku Bello has any connections to Devontae. Once Isabel is unsure of it, she asks Quinlan why she wants to know. Before Quinlan says anything, she tells Isabel how she can't have this going back to Devontae. Isabel assures Quinlan that she won't speak to Devontae about it. Then Quinlan informs Isabel how Adaku pretty much wants to go easy on Devontae, feeling like Adaku's not worried about Devontae walking out of the interview if there are tough questions. Isabel tells Quinlan that since Devontae hid so much from her in the past 20 years, then anything is possible. Quinlan appreciates Isabel for the time she gave, then leaves. When Isabel goes back into the hotel room, Yulissa asks her mother who was at the door. After Isabel tells her daughter how it's nothing to worry about, they hear a knock on the door. When she opens it, she sees Pacho, then she and Yulissa greet him. Now on to week 3. Wanda is spending time with her new friend, Owen Grant, wishing that it wasn't at Theodosius' palace. He understands her disdain, asking her why she doesn't go to another hotel. Wanda states how a part of her just wants to have the chance to strangle Devontae for taking her best friend's life, but expresses how she's trying to decide whether to rent out an apartment or go to another hotel, expressing how she doesn't want to go through the hassle of going to another hotel, but renting an apartment seems so permanent. Owen suggests that she stay at his apartment until she figures it out, specifically his apartment complex, telling her that she can always move out if she's able to work things out with Udell. Wanda's unsure about it, but Owen points out that she could keep giving money to the man who took her best friend's life or move closer to her new friend, speaking about himself. At Quinlan's apartment, she approaches her younger brother Zeke, asking him when he planned to tell her that he broke up with Nichelle. He tells Quinlan how he didn't want to upset her. Quinlan reminds Zeke how she would only be disappointed if he ended up hurting Nichelle the way that she hurt Ben, asking Zeke if he did so. Once Zeke tells his older sister how it doesn't matter, that makes it clear to Quinlan that Zeke did exactly what she hoped he wouldn't do, asking him who he cheated on Nichelle with. He responds that it doesn't matter, telling Quinlan that he made a stupid choice and it cost him Nichelle. When Zeke walks off, the door knocks and Quinlan opens it to find Gianni. Pacho eats at a diner with Isabel and Yulissa, discussing how much has changed since he's been gone. He mentions the fact that the craziest bit was finding out what sort of person his father Devontae is. Seeing how upset Isabel and Yulissa are, he apologizes, then expresses how the news of Devontae taking Elvira Roos's life didn't surprise him. When Isabel and Yulissa ask him why he says that, Pacho tells his mother and his sister to forget it. Isabel asks her son when he'll tell Devontae and Nichelle that he's back in town. Pacho doesn't think that it's a good idea, but since the family is already broken, Isabel feels like it would make things worse if Pacho doesn't speak to his father or his sister at all. Later on, Devontae is surprised to see his son Pacho at Theodosius' palace. Harley arrives at the Russo estate and Alan notices how nervous she seems, telling her that he'll live after the attack. She tells Alan that she's nervous because he won't like the fact that she decided to defend Devante Torres regarding Elvira's case, which Alan doesn't like at all. She reminds Alan that as a lawyer she has to allow everyone to defend themselves in court. He reminds his mother of Devante seducing Elvira, Wanda's testimony, and Ben's testimony, wondering why she has to be Devante's lawyer. This is when Clarice hears this, then rages at Harley for defending the very man who took Elvira's life. Harley tells Clarice how she's only trying to make sure that an innocent man doesn't go down for a violent crime. Clarice disagrees, feeling like Harley is only going after Devante's money. Harley tries to make it known that it isn't personal, but Alan and Clarice disagree, telling Harley to leave. Before she does, Harley reminds Alan that she is his mother, how she'll always love him, and that she'll do whatever it takes to protect him. Harley walks out, crying outside as Alan cries into his grandmother's arms. At the Dorval estate, Jeremiah is approached by a worried Shelley. He begins to ask his wife what's troubling her. Shelley hands her husband the letter, explaining to him that it's what's inside which troubles her. Jeremiah reads a hateful letter about immigrants, but assures Shelley that everything will be okay. Raymond walks in and is filled in about the letter, wondering if they'll get the police involved. Jeremiah feels like that would be a waste of time since he already feels like he knows who's behind it. His theory is that the Russos sent that letter since they couldn't run him out of town after Isidor's lawsuit. Worried, this causes Shelley to wonder if Jeremiah plans to confront the Russos about this, reminding her husband of the catastrophe which occurred the last time he confronted them, expressing his anger over the fact that she agreed to defend Devante regarding Elvira's case. Harley tells Isidore that if she thought that Devante did something so horrible, then she would have never agreed to be his lawyer. Since Harley agreed, Isidore tells his ex-wife that she must be the dumbest person he ever met, unsure of what he ever saw in her. Harley tells her ex that he saw a bright, beautiful woman all of those years ago, defending her intelligence. Harley goes on to state how it tears her apart knowing that she's hurting their son. Then Isidore tells Harley to drop Devante as her client. She tells Isidore that she can't do that, and we all know why, wondering why Devante wants her as his lawyer. Harley reminds Isidore about confidentiality, telling her ex-husband to walk off. Isidore warns Harley that if Devante gets away with what he's done, then she'll be marked as an enemy to the family forever, and that Alan will never forgive her. Devante asks his son Pacho why he's at Theodosius' palace. Then Pacho asks his father if he took Elvira Russo's life. Devante asks his son what he thinks. Pacho admits that Devante is messed up for cheating on Isabel when Pacho was only a toddler. Devante admits his faults, but tells his son how his faults don't make him a monster, swearing on both Yulissa and Nichelle's lives that he didn't do it, when we all know he did. He asks his son if he believes him, then Pacho claims that he does. Devante is relieved, asking Pacho where he's staying. When Pacho informs his father that he's staying at the same hotel as Isabel, Devante invites his son back to Theodosius' palace to rebuild their relationship. When Pacho eventually agrees, Devante walks off and Pacho prides himself in fooling his father. Quinlan asks Gianni what he wants, then he tells her how he came to prove that he means it when he told her how much he's grown to care for her by divorcing Heidi. This angers Quinlan, telling her lover that she never asked him to do that, asking him to work on his marriage. Gianni, attempting to seduce Quinlan, tells her that she's clinging on to Ben when he's done with her, but Gianni tells Quinlan how he's not done with her, reminding Quinlan how they couldn't resist one another before Ben came along. Suddenly, she hears a door knock, telling Gianni how she wants him gone. Then Heidi appears, seeing Gianni, stating how she's not surprised to see the two of them together. Quinlan tells the couple how her brother is still home, asking them to leave. Heidi tells Quinlan how she has no shame having Zeke present while Gianni is around. Quinlan begins to ask Heidi why she came. Heidi came to tell Quinlan about the damage she caused, ending her marriage and causing her son to spiral. Gianni and Heidi go back and forth with one another. Then Quinlan demands that the both of them leave. Heidi leaves first, but before Gianni heads out, he apologizes for what just occurred, but doesn't apologize for their affair. He goes on to tell Quinlan how he's not giving up on her, then leaves, causing Quinlan to feel conflicted. At the Russo estate, Max sees his parents in the living room, asking them why they're having this meeting. Gianni and Heidi assure Max that they'll always be by his side throughout the trial. Max feels a butt coming, and that's when his parents inform him about the divorce. Not showing any emotion, Max states how he felt it coming, and his parents apologize for the upsetting news. Max begins to ask if they'll be fighting for custody. Heidi and Gianni agree that he's almost 18 and how there's no need for that, asking him where he wants to stay. Max informs his parents how he wants to still stay at the estate, feeling like that's the only thing that makes his life feel normal. Heidi has no debates, telling Max that he can always visit her whenever he'd like. Since that seems to be the only news they have to share, Max asks to be left alone. His parents agree to do so, then walk out as Heidi asks Gianni if he's proud of himself. Gianni tells Heidi how she and Finnegan need to ask themselves the same question since they both broke up their own homes. Heidi walks out. Max sees photos of him behind bars, making his day worse. Keith Burke is shown in his room, showing that he was the one who created the photo, telling himself how Max won't have the strength to fight against Yvette in court. Quinlan arrives at Ben's office, asking her what she wants. She tells Ben how she's been assigned to interview Devante, adding that there's something suspicious about her boss. This causes Ben to ask why he should care. Quinlan answers that it could affect how the world sees Devante Torres and if Elvira will get justice. She goes on to tell Ben about the details of the interview, how she'll need to get her questions approved and that she can't give Devante harsh questions. This causes Ben to suggest that Quinlan leave her job. Quinlan refuses to do such a thing, expressing how she's certain that there's some sort of connection between Devante and Adaku, stating how she could use help finding out what that sort of connection is. Ben tells Quinlan how he won't be working with her after what happened between her and Gianni, asking her if his father told her how he asked him for his blessing the other day. Quinlan tries to change the subject, expressing to Ben how this has nothing to do with her or his father, but this is to make sure that Elvira gets justice. Ben points out how he already did his part in solving the case, encouraging Quinlan to do her part in getting justice for Elvira, since that's what she arrives at Theodosius' palace, telling him how she's done more than enough favors, like having Alan Russo attacked and securing him an interview with Quinlan Franklin, telling Devante to behave himself. Devante assures Adaku that he will behave himself since he's set up everything he needed in order to make sure that he doesn't go down for Elvira Russo's passing. She adds that he's not 100% sure if he'll get away with this crime, reminding him that if he does go down, then she won't be able to use his facilities. Confused, Devante asks Adaku what she's asking him to do for her. Adaku wonders if she can have full control of Theodosius' palace if he goes down for Elvira's passing. Devante tells Adaku how he needs to make sure that his daughters are provided for. Even though Adaku promises to make sure that his daughters are well taken care of, he reminds Adaku how Theodosius' palace has remained in his family for generations, stating how he wanted to pass it down to one of his children to run in the future. Devante tells Adaku how he plans to get away with his crimes, immediately shutting the conversation down. Nichelle arrives home from school, then Pacho asks his younger sister why she's been so distant since he came back home. She tells her older brother how it seems sketchy that he has been distant from the family, and suddenly he's living at Theodosius' palace again, as if the past couple of years never happened, asking Pacho what he's up to. The answer that Pacho gives is that he's not up to anything. Nichelle tells Pacho how she's not stupid. Even though Pacho claims that he doesn't think Nichelle is stupid, he explains how he's still not super close with their father, stating how he's staying at Theodosius' palace to just rebuild their bond. Nichelle tells her brother how she refuses to be fooled, telling him that she'll figure out what he's up to, and this time, he won't be the one choosing to leave town. When Nichelle walks off, Pacho gets a call from Ulissa, asking him why he didn't tell her that he made amends with their father and moved back to Theodosius' palace. Terry enters Key's room, asking her son what he's up to. When he answers nothing, he begins to ask his mother if she figured out everything regarding the custody. Terry wonders why her son is worried about it. Keith lets his mother know that he understands how custody arrangements are supposed to be done during a divorce, unless Terry doesn't want him. Terry states that she does want him, asking if she's the parent that he'd rather stay with. Keith tells his mother that he doesn't really care who he stays with, just as long as he's able to have a room to himself. She states how surprised she is, feeling like he would be adamant about not staying with Finnegan because of Finnegan's affair with Heidi. He tells his mother how his only concern was to make sure that Finnegan wouldn't pursue Heidi, causing him to be Max's stepbrother. Terry wants to know why Keith is so opposed to being a stepbrother to Max Russo. Keith reminds his mother how Max Russo has been accused of forcing himself on Yvette Mitchell and doesn't want any connection to that. After hearing the explanation, this is something which Terry understands. Before she leaves Keith's room, Terry tells her son not to be concerned about the custody arrangement. After Terry is gone, Keith creates a forum about hating Max Russo. At Theodosius' palace, after asking Harley if she plans to get her own office space soon, Finnegan states how he notices Harley being in a bad mood. When Harley claims that she isn't in a bad mood, Finnegan reminds the lawyer how it's his job to study other people's emotions, expressing how he doesn't want a lawyer who's in a bad mood. Harley states that she's dealing with some family issues. Finnegan expresses how sorry he is to hear about that, which Harley appreciates. He goes on to ask Harley if she would like to talk about it. Annoyed, she tells her client how she would rather not. Finnegan wonders if she's spoken to anyone about what she's going through. This causes her to ask Finnegan why he cares. The answer which he gives is that she's a powerhouse and would hate for her hardships to get in the way of doing her magic in the courtroom. To get Finnegan off of her back, Harley admits that she's defending Devontae Torres. Then Finnegan understands how that would create family issues, wondering why she accepted him as a client. She states how other people might question why she's defending an adulterer who destroyed his marriage. Finnegan agrees how that's a fair question, but states that cheating and taking someone's life are two completely different things. Harley begins to ask Finnegan if he wants to talk about Devontae Torres all day or discuss a plan to ensure that he keeps custody of his son. Isidore meets with Alan, stating how he hasn't spoken much after hearing the news that Devontae will be defended by Harley. Alan tells his father how they need to make sure that Devontae won't get away with what he did to Elvira. When Isidore tries to assure his son that Devontae won't get away with it, Alan points out that with Harley as his lawyer, he has a higher chance of being found not guilty. Isidore agrees, but Alan goes on to say that Devontae can't get away with what he's done since Devontae took something precious from their family, planning to take something precious from Devontae's family. A bit concerned, Isidore asks Alan what he plans to do. Alan tells his father how they should go after Theodosius' palace. Isidore is unsure of that, reminding his son what happened the last time he tried going after someone else's business, especially since they lost shares to Russo Jewelers because of it. Alan tells his father how he was reckless, but this time Isidore is involved with this plan from the very beginning. He goes on to say how Devontae can't run Theodosius' palace from prison or run it with people who thinks he's guilty. Isidore points out how going after Theodosius' palace is a huge challenge. Alan believes that it's possible, especially since Devontae is fighting for his freedom and they have to provide Elvira with justice, asking his father if he's in. Isidore agrees to help Alan get in control of Theodosius' palace. Then Isabel calls Isidore, telling him that she has agreed to stay at the Russo estate with Ulissa. When Ulissa asks him why he's back in Theodosius' palace and what he's up to, Pacho tries telling Ulissa how she doesn't need to worry about that. Ulissa tells Pacho how he's playing a dangerous game. He tries to assure his sister that Devontae won't hurt him, explaining how he's trying to convince their father to hand the hotel over to him. Confused, Ulissa asks how he plans to do so. Pacho tells Ulissa that the less she knows, the better. She begins asking Pacho why he even wants Theodosius' palace when he showed no interest before. Pacho states how he's doing this for the family, stating that if Devontae goes to prison, then keeping the hotel and the family could keep the family together. Stating how she has no idea how many people will come after the hotel if Devontae were to get convicted. Then ask Ulissa to trust him, but not say a word to anyone. Ulissa reluctantly agrees to. Once the phone call is over, Pacho tells himself how he won't allow his home to become a drug operation, revealing that he knows about Devontae's connection to Adagu, the drug lord. Welcome to the 4th week of this year's In Times Like These recap. Now let's get into this. Starting with Max Russo, who was approached by Yulissa Torres at school, discussing the fact that she and her mother Isabel will move into the Russo estate. He states how she might not want people to know that since it seems like the whole world hates him because of the social media hate page Kiev Berg made about them, but they don't know that Kiev is behind it. Yulissa assures Max that the whole world doesn't hate him, stating how he has family and other students who don't believe Yvette. She goes on to encourage him to ignore what the internet is saying about him. Max begins to wonder if Vanessa is joining in on the online hate. Yulissa assures Max that Vanessa isn't like that, trying to encourage him that Vanessa will figure out the truth. After she says that, a photo goes around of the both of them, warning Yulissa to stay away from Max. Isabel Torres arrives at the estate, welcomed by her ex, Isidore Russo. She tells Isidora how they need to set some ground rules and doesn't really have much desire to interact with him while she and Yulissa stay. Isidore states how they'll keep running into each other. Since the estate is huge, Isabel feels like it's possible for them to keep their distance. Before she heads to her room, Isidore asks Isabel what she plans to do if Devante gets away with what he did to Elvira. Isabel tells Isidore how she's hoping that Elvira gets justice. That way Yulissa can go back to Theodosius' palace like she hopes to, and Devante can pass it on to her and Nichelle. He begins to ask if she has any idea on who would run the hotel. Isabel begins to ask Isidore why he's so concerned. Not wanting to explain that he and his son Alan plan to take over Theodosius' palace, the answer that Isidore gives is that since she won't be staying at the estate forever, he's just concerned about what she'll do next. Isabel tells Isidore to let her worry about that and to grant her wishes. Then she walks off. Afterward, Isidore is met by Jeremiah Dorval. Heidi Russo is in her office, surprised to see Clarice entering. She asks her mother-in-law if she came in to scold her for the divorce. Clarice denies how that's not what she came in to do, telling her daughter-in-law how she shouldn't give up on her marriage just because Gianni is. She goes on about how she's certain that Gianni wants to pursue Quinlan when he still loves Heidi, certain that Heidi still loves Gianni too. Even if Clarice is right, Heidi feels like there's no way that Gianni will see past her hurt. Clarice encourages Heidi to fight, telling her daughter-in-law how Quinlan isn't fit to wear her shoes. Harley Drake is met outside of her room in Theodosius' palace by a drunk Ben Russo, confronting her about the fact that she's defending Devante Torres, but that it doesn't make sense as to why she would, since she longs to have a close relationship with her son Alan. He begins to wonder if Devante has something over her head or over Alan's head. After Harley is adamant that Devante doesn't, Ben begins to remember that Alan was attacked recently and all of a sudden she became Devante's lawyer, questioning if Devante was behind his cousin's attack. Harley pleads with Ben to leave it alone. Ben rushes off, then Harley follows. Once Ben reaches up to Devante, Ben punches him, knocking him to the ground. Devante Torres gets back up, asking Harley what she told Ben. She's adamant that she only told Ben nothing, telling Devante about Ben's claims. As for Ben, he's certain that he's not making crazy claims, telling Devante how he won't allow him to intimidate his way out of prison. When Ben charges at Devante once again, Devante's son Pacho stops him. Pacho suggests that Ben leaves, but Ben refuses to leave, knowing that Devante is a threat to his entire family. Devante threatens to have security called to throw Ben out, telling him that he'll also be pressing charges. Before Ben gets arrested, he tells Devante how he only wants to get rid of him because he sees him as a threat. Eventually, Ben is handcuffed and thrown out of the hotel as he calls Devante a coward. Vanessa Dorval checks up on her best friend Yulissa after the photo of her and Max was spread all over the internet. Yulissa expresses how Vanessa should be concerned about Max, pointing out how she was right about Max being cyberbullied, adding the fact that someone is taking photos of them without their knowledge. Vanessa begins to admit that it's getting a bit excessive. As for Yulissa, she feels like it's more than a bit excessive. stating how the new social media page against Max is filled with hateful comments. Even though Vanessa understands that two wrongs don't make a right, she feels like it doesn't erase the fact that Max forced himself on Yvette, allegedly. Yulissa begins to explain to Vanessa how Max feels like she hates him because of Yvette's accusations. Vanessa admits that she hates what Max has done, stating how she would like for him to turn his life around. Yulissa expresses that she would like Max to give his life to Christ as well, but states that she'd also like to see that he doesn't get tormented while his freedom is already at stake. Yvette Mitchell and Zeke Franklin come out of the school basement after doing the nasty, since Zeke is pretty much using Yvette for pleasure, since hooking up with Yvette is what made his relationship with Nichelle end in the first place. JJ Dorval notices this, but when he confronts Yvette, she states how it's nothing. He proceeds to ask Yvette if she can get people to stop hating on Max on the internet for Yulissa's sake. Yvette questions if JJ cares about Yulissa more than her, since Yulissa just converted to Christianity. Before JJ has a chance to reply, Keeve approaches them, talking about the viral photo that he created. Yvette walks off, then JJ scolds Keeve for being insensitive. After Jeremiah tells Essidor about the threatening letter, Essidor is adamant that he had nothing to do with it. Jeremiah reminds Essidor how he tried to run him out of town before and doesn't feel like Essidor was happy that he failed to do so. Annoyed, Essidor tells Jeremiah how he has more important things to worry about than to cause problems for him. Jeremiah receives a threatening text, believing that Essidor had nothing to do with it, then walks off, texting the anonymous individual, threatening to call the police. But the individual threatens Jeremiah and his family. Heidi arrives at the police station to bail Ben out, asking her son if he'll finally stop abusing the alcohol. Ben tells his mother to leave it alone, but she tells him how she won't leave it alone and see him self-destruct, asking him what would possess him to attack Devante. Instead of telling his mother about his suspicions, Ben expresses his disdain of Harley defending the man who took Elvira's life. Heidi tells her son to get a hold of his emotions, but can't do that while he's on the bottle, especially when she's already worried about Max's case against Yvette, expressing how he knows that she's right. Ben asks his mother why she left out the part that she and Gianni are divorcing. Heidi explains to her son that Clarice spoke to her, understanding that she's responsible for the current state of her marriage but won't give up on it. This causes Ben to ask if Heidi will refuse to sign the divorce papers. Pacho asks his father Devante if he's okay. Devante tells his son that he'll live, thanking him for standing up for him against Ben. Suddenly, Nichelle shows up, asking her father what happened. When Pacho tries to tell Nichelle that it doesn't matter, Devante informs his daughter of the altercation, assuring her that he'll be okay. When Devante goes on to state how he'll be pressing charges, Pacho expresses how he doesn't think that's necessary. Nichelle wonders if her older brother wants the person who attacked their father to get away with what they did. The response that Pacho gives Nichelle is that he only wants to move past it. Devante isn't willing to move past it at all, especially since Ben is the reason why he's facing charges for Elvira's passing. Pacho reminds Devante that Ben is the son of the district attorney, stating that Ben might not face legal consequences. Once Devante states that he'll make sure Ben faces consequences, Pacho wonders what his father means by that. All Devante replies with is that karma will get Ben. At Russo Jewelers, Alan is in his father's office as Alan expresses to Essidor how concerned he is about Isabel and Yulissa moving into the family estate while they're trying to obtain Theodosius' palace. As for Alan, he feels like that's the exact opposite of what Essidor wants, wondering if his feelings will get in the way of going after Theodosius' palace like they agreed. Essidor tells his son how he never allowed his feelings to mix with business. Alan wonders whether Essidor would care what Isabel would feel when they acquire Theodosius' palace. Essidor tells his son to let him worry about that. Even though Alan wants to trust his father, he tells him how he can't risk failing their task. mentioning that it's much more than a business acquisition, but it's to ensure that Elvira gets justice. Isidore understands what's at stake, telling his son that there's no reason for him to worry. Alan tells his father that he'll trust him not to let his feelings about Isabel get in the way of taking over Theodosius' palace. At the Dorval estate, Jeremiah informs his wife Shelley that he confronted Isidore. Shelley expresses her dislike of what he did. Jeremiah understands his wife's frustration, telling her that he needed to find out if the Russos were behind the letter. Finding out that they weren't, informing her of the text message he received. This is when Shelley asks her husband if he'll agree to go to the police. Jeremiah states how he doesn't feel like there's enough to go to the police with, but Shelley disagrees, stating that this person is going after their family. In Jeremiah's viewpoint, whoever is sending messages is all talk, but Shelley isn't willing to take the risk. Jeremiah responds by saying that whoever is making these threats will be the one taking the risk if they come after them. He goes on to say how their family is facing peace right now and doesn't want their children, especially JJ, to worry about something that might not be worth anything worrying about. Shelley wonders what they'll do about the harassment. The answer that Jeremiah gives is to ignore the person who's sending the text and work hard not to react to them. What the two of them don't know is that JJ heard the entire thing. When Heidi meets with Gianni at the Russo estate, she tells her husband that she didn't come to speak about Ben and Max, but to tell him that she won't be signing the divorce papers. Gianni tells his wife that she has no other choice. Heidi tells her husband how wrong he is, expressing how she's done a lot of thinking and states how she doesn't want a divorce. Scoffing, Gianni states how he wants one and doesn't want to stay married to her so that she can keep his family's benefits. Heidi tells Gianni how it's more than just keeping his family's benefits, but states how she's still in love with him. Gianni doesn't believe it, telling her that he's no longer in love with her, which she doesn't believe. She goes on to tell him how she can't imagine a life without him. Gianni tells Heidi that she doesn't have to imagine since they're connected through their sons for life. He adds how she doesn't just get to come running back to him when she gets tired of Finnegan. Once again, Heidi reminds her husband that her affair with Finnegan was a mistake and that she was living a fantasy, just like he's trying to live a fantasy with Quinlan. Gianni claims that what he has with Quinlan is real. When Heidi asks why Quinlan hasn't agreed to become official with him, he tells Heidi how sad she is and that she needs to leave. Before she heads off, Heidi tells her husband how she will be back at the estate and that she will be his wife until the day he dies. When JJ and Vanessa come back home from school, she points out how she's noticed how JJ is in such a bad mood, questioning if he's still taking his medication. Annoyed, JJ tells his sister that he is still taking his medication. This causes Vanessa to ask her younger brother what's wrong. He tells his sister how their parents are hiding something from them. When Vanessa asks what it is, JJ expresses how he doesn't know for sure, but overheard their parents state that they've been getting threats from someone and doesn't want them to know. As for Vanessa, she feels like their parents just don't want them to worry, but JJ feels like their parents would have let them in if he wasn't schizophrenic. She expresses how she doesn't believe that at all, but JJ reminds Vanessa that he heard a good portion of it. Hearing their father state how JJ is getting the hang of the disease, fearing that he'll go insane again, feeling like their parents can't trust him enough to handle the bad news. Vanessa suggests that JJ tells his parents about it, but he refuses, feeling like they'll just hover over him. Even though Vanessa tries to assure her younger brother how that isn't true, JJ feels like it is because of what their parents are doing at the moment. Vanessa begins to ask JJ what he plans to do about it. JJ tells his sister that he'll prove to their parents that he won't go crazy with what he already knows. Max walks into Ben's condo, finding him drinking, asking his older brother if he's learned nothing after getting arrested. Ben states how he only learned that he should have pushed Pacho out of the way so that he can go after Devante. Angered, Max asks his older brother if he plans to face a judge like that, and saying those words, wondering if he cares that Devante is pressing charges against him. Ben states that he doesn't, certain that he'll get off for being Heidi's son. This proceeds to anger Max even more, stating how he wishes that he had Ben's confidence when it came to Yvette's accusations against him. Ben begins to apologize, asking Max how he's holding up. Max tells Ben how he's not making it easier with his reckless behavior, even though Ben reminds Max that it's not his responsibility to worry about him. Max states how difficult that would be, since that means he would have to stop caring about him. Ben tells his brother how neither of them are going to prison. Max states how he's not too sure about that, then states how he's starting to not care. Worried, Ben wonders if Max is saying that because of the drinking. The response that Max gives is that he just wants everything to be over. Ben tells his brother to hang in there and fight for his freedom. Max replies by telling Ben that he should just tell himself that and fight for his own life, walking off. At the Global News Press studio, Adaku introduces Quinlan to Devante, but of course there's no need for introduction because Zeke dated Nichelle. But we all know how that ended up. Adaku leaves, telling Quinlan to behave herself. Then Quinlan asks Devante how long he's known Adaku for. The answer that he gives is that he hasn't known Adaku for long, but wanted to get in touch with her to share his side of the story. But he also tells the reporter how it doesn't seem like she's too happy to be speaking with him, wondering if she thinks that he took Elvira's life. Quinlan, assuring Devante that she has no issue with him personally due to Zeke, explains to Devante that it doesn't matter what she thinks, and that it's up to the American people to decide for themselves whether he's guilty or not. She also reminds Devante that she'll be interviewing him about a serious crime which he's been charged with, adding how it's a crime which destroyed an entire family and left a 5-year-old boy traumatized. Since she did a documentary on Elvira, Devante states how he understands why she would feel such a close connection to the Russos, trying to make it seem like he's not the reason for their pain. Quinlan states how they'll have to wait for a jury to decide that. Then they get ready to begin the interview. Welcome to the 5th week of this year's In Times Like These recap. Now let's get into this. Starting with Wanda Mitchell, who sorrowfully moves into her new apartment, then is visited by Owen Grant, who convinces her to watch Devante's televised interview. Not only do they watch the interview, but so do Pacho Torres, his younger sister Nichelle, the Russo family, and Udell Mitchell. Quinlan begins to ask Devante how he got involved with Elvira Russo as Adaku watches the entire thing to make sure that Quinlan stays in line. Devante tried to make it seem like Elvira pursued him, but Quinlan asks if it was the other way around since Elvira was 17 back in the day and he was 22. This questioning upsets Adaku, but Quinlan doesn't care and continues to ask Devante tough questions. When she asks Devante who he thinks took Elvira's life, he blames it all on Udell Mitchell. Once the interview ends, Adaku approaches Quinlan, scolding her for tearing into Devante, stating how some of the questions were not approved. Quinlan reminds her boss that she did her job. As for Adaku, she tells Quinlan that she made a huge mistake. Finnegan Burke meets with Harley Drake at Theodosius' palace, asking about her thoughts on Devante's interview. Harley tells Finnegan that since Devante is her client, she won't share her thoughts about his comments and tells Finnegan to focus on his own case, asking if he's using her to secure a conviction against Devante. This causes Finnegan to ask Harley if she'll drop him as a client because of her suspicions. Harley assures Finnegan that she won't drop him as a client, stating that he wouldn't do anything to not be able to be in her presence. She begins to express how Finnegan is trying to flatter her, asking him if he understands how unprofessional that is. When he asks Harley if she doesn't like being flattered, she tells him that it's his flattery with Heidi, which is what ended him up in this situation to begin with. Finnegan tells Harley how that was a bit hurtful. Harley apologizes. When Finnegan reminds Harley that she didn't answer the question, they stare at one another, then start kissing, which leads to them starting their affair. Adaku meets with Devante at Theodosius' palace. Then he asks her why he was thrown off guard from the interview. When Adaku apologizes, Devante states how that's not an answer, reminding his business partner that the interview was supposed to shift public opinion onto his side, but it seems like it's only created more controversy. She asks Devante if he's suggesting that she take Quinlan's life. Devante tells Adaku how it wouldn't be such a bad idea. Annoyed, Adaku states how that would be a huge risk. Adaku adds how she doesn't like how he's talking to her, as if she doesn't have everything under control. The fact that Devante lays out is that after the interview, it's clear that Adaku doesn't have everything under control, urging her to have everything under control or they both could lose their empires. When Devante walks away from Adaku, she says to herself how she won't lose hers, but he might lose his. Quinlan meets with Ben Russo in his office. She informs Ben that her boss is really angry with her for asking Devante questions that were not approved, expressing how scared she is, informing him how the way that Adaku spoke to her made it feel like she would harm her. Quinlan states that if the diary is finally out in public, then she can be safe, especially when Devante lied about the details of his affair with Elvira. When Ben believes that Quinlan is overreacting, stating that his testimony and Wanda's testimony should be enough, Quinlan asks Ben if he's really willing to take that risk. Ben tells Quinlan that if she's so scared, then she should go to his dad for protection. Without saying another word, Quinlan walks out, then does as Ben suggests and meets with Gianni. At Mitchell Law, Udell receives a visit from Wanda, asking her husband how he's holding up after the interview. Udell tells Wanda how he's just going on with business as usual and ignoring the media, even though they both know that Devante lied on national television. Udell tells his wife how they would have known earlier if she had spoken up the very moment she heard about Devante. Wanda acknowledges her faults, then tells Udell how she's tired of him, rubbing that in her face every single chance he gets. She goes on to remind Udell how Devante is the guilty party, stating that it's not like she handed Devante the knife to end Elvira's life. Udell points out that if she would have just told him that Elvira cheated on him with Elvira, then her life could have been spared. Eventually, Wanda screams out that she'll just build a time machine, do what he asked, allow him and Elvira to have their happily ever after and erase the years that they spent together, stating how it's clear that it meant nothing to him after all this time. After Wanda storms out of her husband's office, she cries in Owen's arms at his office. Now on to week 6. After Wanda calms down, she expresses how she feels like her marriage really is over, informing him what just went down at Udell's office. Upon hearing this, Owen offers his sympathies and expresses how it seems like Udell is allowing himself to lose a good wife. This causes Owen to ask Wanda why she would force herself to live in a loveless marriage. Wanda answers that her love for Udell was real, stating that it still is. Owen begins to ask Wanda if she's punishing herself for loving a man who doesn't love her the same way. Wanda admits that it does seem like Udell will never love her as much as he loved Elvira. She goes on to say that she'll have to accept that. Inside of her hotel room, Harley is in shock after hooking up with Finnegan, stating how they can never hook up again since she's Finnegan's lawyer, pointing out that if Terry finds out, then he'll lose his case. As soon as Finnegan promises not to tell, she reminds him how he failed to keep that promise when he was exposed for having an affair with Heidi. He tries to tell Harley that he can learn from his mistakes. Harley tells him that he can start learning by agreeing that this never happened to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Finnegan expresses how he can't forget what happened between them. Angrily, Harley urges him to try, especially since she can't risk anyone else finding out that she slept with the man who tore Gianni and Heidi's marriage apart. She goes on to ask Finnegan to leave. When he agrees to do so, Finnegan tells Harley how he doesn't regret their time together. Isidore Russo meets with Terry Berg at her office in Valley Park Memorial Hospital, informing her how he plans to take over Theodosius' palace. She begins to ask how she could possibly help him with that. He tells her how Devante could use a distraction. Worried, Terry wonders if she's trying to make her bond with a criminal. Isidore reminds Terry that she's just as bad, and forming a bond with Devante Torres is exactly what he wants her to do. Once Terry asks Isidore how she's supposed to form a friendship with Devante Torres, he asks her to create a fake medical record. After hearing what Isidore has planned, she tells him how that could create havoc if Devante or anyone else finds out that she was behind the fake document. Isidore reminds Terry that it would be a greater tragedy if people found out about her part in his grandparents' passing. Reluctantly, she agrees to do what Isidore asks. Showing concern, Gianni asks Quinlan what's wrong. She informs him that she could be in danger after her interview with Devante. This worries Gianni even more, asking Quinlan if Devante threatened her. She informs him that he hasn't, but that Adaku has, filling him in on how she disobeyed Adaku's orders regarding the interview. When Gianni asks Quinlan if she thinks that Adaku is dangerous, Quinlan replies how she isn't sure but knows that she needs protection. He begins to ask Quinlan how he could protect her. Quinlan immediately kisses Gianni, telling him to go public with her and proceed with the divorce. Confused, Gianni wonders if Quinlan only wants him so that he could offer her protection. Quinlan claims that Gianni makes her feel safe. On top of that, she tells Gianni how he has a point and that she does feel a deeper connection to him since they've been together. He promises Quinlan to keep her safe, warning her that Heidi isn't willing to have a divorce. Quinlan asks Gianni if he loves Heidi. Once Gianni claims that he no longer loves Heidi and is in love with Quinlan, they embrace. But why does Quinlan look guilty? At Adaku's office, Quinlan enters and asks Adaku what she wants. Adaku states how she would like to apologize. Confused, Quinlan asks her boss where this is coming from. According to Adaku, she claims that she was out of line and should have congratulated Quinlan for doing her job and pulling in numbers for the interview. Once Quinlan asks Adaku why she needed her questions reviewed in the first place, Gianni enters, requesting that he and his family respond to Devante's interview. Adaku agrees, suggests that Quinlan interview the Russos, but Gianni states how that would be a conflict of interest, then quizzes Quinlan in front of her boss. Adaku is clearly confused and asks the two lovers to leave her office. Quinlan asks Gianni why he did all that in front of her boss. He reminds Quinlan how they were supposed to go public. She informs him how Adaku apologized, but Gianni begins to ask Quinlan if she's certain that Adaku was serious. When Quinlan expresses how she's not certain, Gianni assures Quinlan that she's safe and that as long as they're together, she'll always be safe. Devante is approached by Isidore and his son Alan at Theodosius' palace and is asked if he gave Elvira an STD before she passed away, filling Devante in about how a medical record was leaked online. Disgusted, Devante states that he never once had an STD and that the record is fake. Alan pulls out his phone, recording Devante, asking him if he'd still like to lie more when he's recorded. Devante asks Alan to put the phone away, but Alan refuses, angering Devante even more. He demands that the Russos leave the hotel. As Isidore and Alan leave, they have a look of satisfaction on their faces. Harley spots Finnegan in the hotel and attempts to ignore him, but it doesn't work. She tells him that she has nothing to talk about regarding the case, telling him how they don't need to speak about anything else. Finnegan disagrees, expressing how he hasn't stopped thinking about her, explaining that he doesn't want to go separate ways when she's no longer his lawyer. Finnegan goes on about how he's thought a lot about it and states that they can start seeing one another when the case is over, asking Harley if she could at least wait for him. Harley states how she's only annoyed by him and tells Finnegan not to waste his time. Suddenly, Terry shows up. Annoyed, Finnegan asks his wife what she's doing at the hotel. She tells him how she needed to speak with Devante. Harley tells Finnegan how he'll give him time with his wife. Once Terry sees Harley walk off, she asks Finnegan why she gets the feeling that his own lawyer doesn't like him that much. When Finnegan states how Harley likes him more than Terry thinks, she asks him what he means by that. All Finnegan responds with is by saying that he and Harley get along, unlike how they were able to for the majority of their marriage, walking away from Terry. Keith Burke spray paints Max's car, then takes a picture of it where everyone can see. Max gets the notification and isn't too happy. As he sulks, Vanessa Dorval walks up to Max, asking if he should be getting to class. Max tells Vanessa how he didn't think that she would care. Vanessa tells Max how she's not going to just stand and watch him feel sorry for himself when he put Yvette through so much more. Max expresses how he's not surprised that she thinks so low of him. Vanessa states that she wouldn't think so low of him if he just pleads guilty. Annoyed, Max tells Vanessa how he's not pleading guilty for something that he didn't do. She tells Max that he could probably find peace by admitting to his faults and pleading guilty, stating how the court would most likely go easy on him, especially because of the family that he's a part of. Most of all, believing that it could bring him and Yvette peace. Max tells Vanessa how she doesn't care about seeing him at peace, but to see him out of her way. Before Vanessa walks off, she tells Max not to claim that she didn't try to help him. After she walks off, Keeve approaches Max, then asks Keeve what he wants. Keeve wants to know what's wrong with his family, pointing out how Heidi broke up his parents' marriage and how a whole town will realize that they're sharing the road with someone who hurts girls. When Max tells Keeve to leave him alone, Keeve continues to push Max's buttons. Keeve continues to push Max's buttons by expressing how Heidi was clearly a whore and that he wanted to be just like his mom, but no girl in school would give him the time of day, so he had to force it on Yvette. That's when Max rages and grabs Keeve, telling Keeve that if he's going to prison, then he might as well go to prison for something he did do. Terry approaches Devontae, apologizing for the leaked photo. When Devontae asks the doctor why she should be sorry, she answers that the hospital's name is included in the fake document and is embarrassed that it has spread all over the internet, promising to get to the bottom of it. Devontae appreciates it, especially when he comes across someone he's unsure will believe in his innocence. Terry claims that everyone is innocent until proven guilty. This allows Devontae to put some of his guard down when it comes to Terry. She thanks him for not holding any anger against the hospital. Devontae states how he shouldn't be angry at the hospital because of the actions of those who are trying to bring him down. Terry assures Devontae that she'll update him on the fake document, stating that the hospital will make a statement very soon. Before Terry leaves, Devontae tells her that she's welcomed at the hotel anytime. Looks like Isidor's plan is in full effect. Isabel Torres runs into Isidore at the Russo estate. He notices how upset she is. Then Isabel explains that she's upset about recently hearing about Devontae's supposed STD. Not telling his ex that he had any part in that, Isidore expresses his sympathies. She states how Devontae held so many secrets from her when she sacrificed so much to stay married to him. He begins to wonder if covering up their one-night stand was the sacrifice she made, instead of telling Isidore how she terminated the pregnancy, where she carried his child. She only expresses how she felt guilt over their one-night stand for years, but is only focused on getting Theodosius' palace for her daughters. Isidore questions if that means divorcing Devontae. Isabel states that she doesn't want to go through the hassle of a divorce until after Devontae gets convicted, then walks off. Jeremiah Dorval carries a package inside of his HVAC business. As he and Shelley wonder what it is, once Jeremiah opens the box, he notices a noose in the package. This concerns Shelley, but Jeremiah tells Shelley that the person who is harassing them wants them to be scared, urging his wife not to give in. Shelley expresses how she can't help but worry, wondering if the person who is harassing them has their eyes on the kids, going on about how Vanessa and JJ need to know what's going on. Once again, Jeremiah reminds his wife that JJ is in a good place and can't risk him having any setbacks. Shelley wonders if he would rather put JJ and Vanessa in harm's way. He tells his wife how she knows that's the last thing he wants, reminding her how smart their kids are and how they're aware of their surroundings. As soon as Shelley says that, Jeremiah gets a text from the anonymous individual stating how they hope he received his gift and hopes that he enjoyed it. Shelley asks if Jeremiah received another threatening text. After Jeremiah admits that he has, Shelley tells her husband that he needs to figure out a way to stop this before they receive a worse gift. At Russo Jewelers, Alan pops into Esidore's office, where Esidore introduces his son to the new intern, Vivian Jones. Gianni and Lorenzo enter the office and are introduced to the new intern. When she walks out, she gives the family a look, and once she's gone, Gianni tells his family that he's dating Quinlan Franklin. Lorenzo is not pleased. When Gianni states how he loves Quinlan, his family tells him that he's clearly in a midlife crisis, added with the hurt of Heidi's betrayal, and that his head is all over the place. Gianni claims that he's thinking clearly and tells them how Quinlan is in love with him. Gianni makes it clear that Quinlan isn't a gold digger, and that she's an intelligent woman who wants to make her way. After the family asks how he thinks Heidi really acts, Gianni explains to them how Heidi wouldn't want to embarrass herself by explaining to the public that she was unfaithful first. When Vanessa approaches Max at school explaining how she heard from JJ how he harmed Keeve, Max admits that he did, trying to tell Vanessa how the altercation with Keeve was not his fault. Since Vanessa is not hearing it, Max questions why he's wasting his time. Then Keeve approaches Vanessa. She expresses how sorry she is to hear how Max attacked him. Keeve tells Vanessa how much he appreciates that, but will feel more relieved or safe when Max is in prison. Vanessa walks off and Keeve smirks. Devante talks with Pacho, who sees that the hospital has released a statement about the fake medical record. Suddenly, Isabel comes storming in, confused to see Pacho. She asks her son what he's doing back at Theodosius' palace. Then Devante tells his wife how Pacho believes in his innocence, which surprises Isabel, asking Pacho why he didn't say anything. Pacho tells his mother how he didn't want to hurt her feelings. Devante notices that Isabel didn't show up because she changed her mind, asking why she did show up. Isabel came by to confront him about the STDs. He tells his wife how the document about the STD was false and that the hospital confirmed it. When Isabel asks Devante who could have created a fake document, he tells Isabel how the Russos did. She questions if he knows that for sure. Devante states how he doesn't have any proof but is certain of it. What Isabel can't believe is that he didn't at least attempt to contact her when news about the STD came out. Devante explains how she wanted to keep her distance and that he never had an STD. He goes on to tell Isabel how she should express her anger at the Russos for troubling her. Before Isabel leaves, she tells Pacho how she'd never turn him against his father, but to warn him to keep in mind what sort of man his father is. As we all know, Pacho hasn't lost sight of that, as he has his sights on taking over Theodosius' palace. Quinlan enters Adaku's office as Adaku wants Quinlan to explain how she got involved with Gianni Russo. When Quinlan explains everything, Adaku asks Quinlan how it would look to the network if everyone finds out that she broke up a marriage. Quinlan tries to explain to Adaku how the marriage was already broken before she came along. When Adaku asks for the details, Quinlan tells her boss how it's not her place to say. Upon hearing this, Adaku asks Quinlan if she sees her relationship with Gianni lasting long term. Quinlan claims that she fell hard for Gianni, and Adaku wants to make sure that her employee isn't saying that because of what she can gain from Gianni. Upon hearing this, Quinlan makes it clear to her boss that she wants her hard work to speak for itself. Adaku believes this, encouraging Quinlan not to let this relationship get in the way of her work, especially when Devante's trial will take place in the coming months. Feeling a bit skeptical, Quinlan tells her boss how it sounds like she's trying to see Devante convicted for taking Elvira's life. Adaku still holds on to the fact that everyone is innocent until proven guilty, but tells Quinlan, especially after the release of the leaked medical record, that whatever dirt she can find on Devante, then Quinlan has free reign to expose it. By the looks of it, Adaku wants Devante out of the way.
Welcome to the 7th week of the In Times Like These recap. Now let's get into this. Starting with the Dorval family, Raymond Dorval hands his son a letter, which contains a picture of his grandmother and his mother, with a message saying, "He's next." Shelley tells her husband Jeremiah that if he won't call the police, then she will, which Raymond agrees with. Jeremiah states how calling the police would be pointless, since he feels like they wouldn't be able to track where the letter came from. Raymond and Shelley wonder if Jeremiah wants to wait until action is taken, endangering himself and the rest of the family. Jeremiah points out that the threat was against him and no one else, feeling like if someone tries something with him, then he'll be able to take them down himself. Later on, it's revealed that Devante Torres has been hiring someone to mess with the Dorvals since Jeremiah turned his back on him after Devante was revealed as the man who took Elvira Russo's life. Isidore Russo is surprised when Isabel Torres approaches him, but is even more surprised when Isabel asks him if he's behind the medical record that was shared all over the internet. When Isidore denies having any part in it, Isabel tells Isidore that if she finds out that he's lying, then she will no longer want to speak with him again and will move out of the estate. Isidore tells Isabel how he would never put her through such a stressful time just to get back at Devante. Isabel reminds Isidore how that's exactly how she remembers him being like when they were together. This causes Isidore to ask Isabel if she only remembers the bad, but Isabel admits that he never mistreated her. Isidore tells Isabel how sorry he is for the hurt he caused her when they were together, how he always wanted to make her happy, and how one of the worst days of his life was when he lost her. He goes on to tell Isabel how having the one-night stand with her gave him a glimmer of hope that she would come back to him. The two of them stare for a moment. Then Isabel kisses Isidore. Once she realizes what she's done, she walks away from him. At the courthouse, Heidi Russo and her mother-in-law Clarice show up to support Ben, who's been charged with attacking Devante. To their surprise, Quinlan Franklin shows up, making them uneasy. Quinlan tries to assure them that this is more about reporting on Devante rather than on Ben. Devante, with his son Pacho, steps up to the group, expressing his disapproval over what he just heard. Heidi reminds Devante that he shouldn't be anywhere near Ben before the hearing. Even though Devante wants to thank Ben for pleading guilty, Clarice warns Devante that if he doesn't leave soon, then he'll be lucky enough to press charges against her for attempting to take his life. Ben stands before the judge and receives his sentence, mandatory AA meetings. Zeke Franklin runs into Nichelle Torres at school, but she isn't happy to see her ex. He begins to ask Nichelle if she has any plans for Valentine's Day. She tells Zeke how she should ask him the same thing, asking if he has anything special planned with Yvette. He tells Nichelle how Yvette means nothing to him. Nichelle points out that Yvette is just his little toy. Zeke points out that if it weren't for Yvette, then they would be celebrating their first Valentine's Day together. She tells Zeke how he needs to take accountability for it. He admits to his part in their relationship ending, asking her if they can at least try to start over, especially since it's Valentine's Day, and that he never stopped loving her, stating how he's certain that she never stopped loving him. Nichelle expresses how it doesn't matter what her feelings about him are since she can't trust him. Zeke tells Nichelle how he understands where she's coming from, then wishes her a happy Valentine's Day, wishing that he could spend it with her, and walks away from her. When Zeke gets back home, he stumbles across papers that Quinlan left behind, complaining that he has to eat, then looks at the notes comparing Adaku and Devante. Knowing that Devante is connected to the boss, he figures out that Adaku is most likely the boss. On Valentine's Day, Quinlan is eating dinner with her lover, Gianni Russo. Noticing that something is bothering her, he asks Quinlan what's wrong. The answer that Gianni gives is that she can't stop thinking about Ben and his battle with alcoholism. He answers that Ben just needs to keep himself out of trouble, asking her if she's going to discuss Ben throughout their entire date. Quinlan begins to ask Gianni if he's not concerned about his own son. Gianni replies that he is, but expresses how he wanted their time together to be worry-free for Valentine's Day. She apologizes for bringing any gloom to the date, but she wonders if he's worried that he and Ben will never get close if their relationship lasts longer. Gianni tells Quinlan how he'll deal with it. Quinlan expresses how she doesn't want to be the reason why he loses his son. Gianni states how he doesn't want to lose her or feel like he has to pick and choose, stating how their love will help them figure everything out. Yet, Quinlan thinks back to the first time she shared a kiss with Ben. At Russo Jewelers, Vivian Jones is on the phone with her mother, lying about interning at another company in Tampa, telling her mother that she doesn't have to visit and that she'll be back in Orlando before she knows it. Without knocking, Alan walks into Vivian's office, which she isn't happy about. Alan apologizes, then points out how it's Valentine's Day, asking if she'd like to hang out with him afterward. Immediately, Vivian, who is disgusted, shuts Alan down, telling him that she's only attracted to black men. She goes on to ask Alan to leave and to never ask her out again, promising to work at another place, stating how his father wouldn't be pleased to know why he just lost an intern. Alan apologizes, telling Vivian how he was only trying to be friendly, but she tells him how he was being too friendly. Then Alan leaves. Later on, Vivian drops food off at Theodosius Palace to Pacho, who compliments Viv's looks. He proceeds to offer to treat her to something nice if he gets her number. Vivian tells Pacho how this would most likely be the only time they meet, telling him that if she starts dating someone, then they better be her soulmate. Pacho wishes Vivian a happy Valentine's Day, then walks off, causing them both to blush. Before Yvette leaves Wanda's apartment, Wanda expresses to her daughter how grateful she is that Yvette decided to keep her company on Valentine's Day. The two hug, then Owen shows up. Yvette gives him the side-eye and reluctantly leaves. Owen asks Wanda if she noticed her daughter's attitude. Wanda believes that anything regarding the case makes Yvette nervous, asking him not to take it personally. When Owen asks how she's enjoying Valentine's Day, Wanda expresses how Yvette has helped comfort her, knowing that this is the first Valentine's Day without her husband. Since Yvette just walked out, Owen offers to keep Wanda company for the rest of the day by watching movies. Wanda expresses how she appreciates it, but states that she'll be okay on her own. Owen grants Wanda her wish, then wishes her a happy Valentine's Day. At the Mitchell estate, Udell asks Yvette why she has an attitude. Then she fills her father in on seeing Owen enter Wanda's new apartment. Harley Drake is upset to see Finnegan outside of her hotel room holding flowers and chocolate. She quickly brings him into the hotel room, asking if he wants anyone to see them. Finnegan stated how he knew that no one would see them, and that she would either pull him into her room or turn him away. Glad that she picked the first choice. Harley asks Finnegan what he's doing. Then he tells Harley how he's wishing her a happy Valentine's Day. She tells Finnegan that they're not together, but Finnegan states how they could be if she weren't so opposed to the idea. Harley tells Finnegan how she doesn't have to remind him why they can't see each other. Finnegan agrees, but questions if that also means that she doesn't want to be with him. Harley states that if she's ready to start finding love, then she'll look to other places. Finnegan replies that a man should be looking for her and states how he found her, feeling like he's earned points since it's Valentine's Day. He goes on to tell Harley how he doesn't want their one-night stand to be a one-time thing, stating that he could find another woman, but feels like no one else would compare to her. Finnegan adds that when he asked her to be his lawyer, the last thing he expected was to fall hard for her, asking that she give him a chance. He goes on to tell her that once he walks out of that door, he won't come back and grant her wishes to stay away once the divorce agreement is settled. Just as Finnegan gets ready to leave, Harley stops him and they hook up again. Udell appears in Wanda's office as he begins to ask his wife if she's having an affair with Owen Grant. Angry, Wanda asks her husband where he got such a ridiculous idea from. Udell fills Wanda in on Yvette's concerns. Annoyed, Wanda tells her husband how he should have erased their daughter's fears instead of asking her if she's been unfaithful with the prosecutor on their daughter's case. Udell reminds his wife that keeping secrets is nothing new and just has to be sure. Offended, Wanda feels like he's projecting Elvira's betrayal onto her. She goes on to remind him how she's always been faithful. Since they're on the topic of Owen, she tells Udell how Owen has been a great friend to her ever since she was kicked out of the house, wondering why Udell would even care if she starts seeing someone else. Udell reminds Wanda that Yvette's trial will begin in the coming weeks, stating that Wanda getting involved in an affair would only distract her from supporting their daughter. Wanda expresses how she understands that, but wonders if it would really be an affair if her own husband doesn't want her home. Udell warns Wanda to behave herself, since Yvette doesn't need the added stress. Before Udell walks out, Wanda reminds her husband how their daughter wouldn't have been so worried if he was willing to work things out at home. Yulissa arrives back home, where Isabel thinks back to kissing Isidore, asking her mother what's bothering her. When Isabel tells her daughter not to worry about it, Yulissa wonders if Isabel is still upset about Pacho living with Devante. Isabel admits that it does bother her, but won't take away the time Pacho will get to spend time with Devante before he goes to prison. Yulissa tells her mother how she prays for her father's soul, but isn't sure if she wants to speak with him anytime soon. Just as Yulissa expresses her feelings, Isidore walks up to them. Isabel asks her daughter to let her speak with Isidore alone. When Yulissa obeys, Isidore asks Isabel if she's ready to discuss the elephant in the room. Isabel expresses how for decades she has pretended like she was never unfaithful to her husband, stating how it got her nowhere. She goes on to state how she'll admit what recently happened between the two of them, stating how it can never happen again. Isidore questions why. Isabel answers that she's still married, how what they had is in the past now, and that her fractured family is her main priority. Isidore questions if Isabel felt nothing. All she answers is that she felt like she made a huge mistake, then walks away from Isidore. At Theodosius Palace, Devante Torres asks Adaku why Quinlan was reporting on Ben's sentencing, wondering if she's assigned to report on his trial. Adaku admits that Quinlan has been assigned to it. He reminds Adaku that she could have hired anyone else to report on the trial, wondering why Quinlan has to be the one. She explains how it's just how the business of mass media is, reminding him how the interview drew in huge numbers. Devante tells Adaku how he doesn't need the reminder, but warns Adaku that Quinlan will only look into him further, expressing that Quinlan needs to be handled permanently. Since Quinlan is covering his case, she reminds Devante how taking her life would be a huge risk. On top of that, Adaku informs Devante that Quinlan is dating Gianni Russo. Adaku goes on to say how taking Quinlan's life would only cause more pressure and investigation. Furious, Devante wonders if he's supposed to sit around and do nothing as Quinlan attempts to do all she can to make sure he goes down for Elvira's passing. Speaking firmly, Adaku reminds Devante that he has a lawyer whose responsibility it is to make sure that he doesn't go down for what he did, stating that she doesn't want to lose a spot where she earns a lot of money. She adds that he doesn't need to convince the public that he's innocent and that he needs to convince a court that he is. Quinlan makes a call in her apartment, stating that she received a letter asking what the person on the other line wants. Pacho replies that he wants to ensure that his father pays for his crimes. She begins asking him how she thinks she'll be able to grant his wish. He answers that he noticed her documentary on Elvira Russo and saw that she was bold enough to give Devante tough questions, knowing that Adaku wouldn't have allowed that. Curious, Quinlan begins to question if Pacho knows about the connection between Devante and Adaku. Pacho admits that he does. Then, Quinlan asks how and what the connection is. He responds that it's a lot to reveal over the phone, requesting a time and place to meet in person. This is when Quinlan asks Pacho why she shouldn't think this is a trap. Pacho answers that he wants Theodosius's palace and wants to protect his father from his family, stating that he's only been close to Devante so that Theodosius's palace could be handed over to him. Quinlan wonders if this is about getting power or getting justice. Pacho admits how it's both, especially since both Devante and Adaku are dangerous people. At Russo Jewelers, Alan goes on camera, expressing his disappointment in the hospital for covering for Devante, who he feels paid the hospital off. He goes on to tell people that if they check into Theodosius' palace, then they'll be supporting a monster. After Alan gets off his phone, Vivian walks in, angered at Alan's rant on his live stream, fearing that it could create a lawsuit for the company to fight against. When she asks Isidore if he had any part in it, Isidore lies, telling his intern that he is just as surprised and that he'll handle it. Once she leaves, Isidore tells his son how Devante won't be happy when a number of guests begin checking out of the hotel and a lack of people show up, making Theodosius' palace look like a ghost town. In the lobby, Vivian is on the phone with her mother, who asks when Vivian will visit her. Vivian claims that she'll visit her mother soon, and they tell each other how much they miss each other. Once Vivian is off of the phone, Vivian vows to make the Russos pay for what they took from their family, but states how she can't have her mother get in her way. Why does Vivian want revenge, and what did the Russo family do to hers? Devante is on the phone with someone, ready to cause harm to Jeremiah and Shelley. At Jeremiah's HVAC business, he's loading his gun as Shelley stumbles across him doing so. She tells her husband how he is certain that their family is in danger, stating how he usually doesn't check his gun at work. Jeremiah assures his wife that he's just taking the safest precautions since they haven't heard any threats recently. Shelley asks Jeremiah if the silence is making him worried. He answers that he's not feeling worried, but cautious. She tells him how they shouldn't have to look over their shoulder until something pops off. In Jeremiah's opinion, something needs to pop off for this situation to come to an end. Outside of the business, Shelley tells Jeremiah that she's not going to stand still and watch him get involved in a possible shootout, warning Jeremiah that the next thing that pops off, she will call the police, even if it makes her look stupid. Suddenly, Jeremiah notices a car charging at Shelley's way. He pushes Shelley out of the way. Then Jeremiah gets hit as Shelley proceeds to scream out her husband's name. While standing outside of the corner, selling illegal substances, Zeke's fellow dealer, Ronnie, asks him why his head seems all over the place, wondering if Zeke is thinking about Nichelle. Zeke asks Ronnie if he ever thought about the identity of the big boss. Ronnie tells Zeke how that answer is above either of their pay grade. Once Zeke explains to Ronnie how he understands that he doesn't know either, but questions if Ronnie was ever curious about who the person is, how they rose to power, and if it's a public figure, who they know. The answer that Ronnie gives is that being curious about that could cost him his life. Zeke questions if the big boss would really take someone out for stumbling across their identity. Ronnie questions if there's something that Zeke needs to tell him. The response that Zeke gives is that he's just talking and thinking. Ronnie advises him to do less of that and to focus on selling product and making money. Meeting in the wooded area of a park, Pacho reveals to Quinlan that Adaku Bello doesn't exist. This revelation confuses Quinlan. Pacho informs the reporter that Adaku Bello is actually Adaku Danjuma, the daughter of Kalu Danjuma. Quinlan asks if Pacho is saying that Adaku took over her father's organization. Pacho answers that she did, and she asks how he knows this. He reveals that before he left Valley Park, he wanted to ask his father to invest in his online retail business, which is when he overheard Devante speaking on the phone with Adaku about using the beachfront of the hotel to sell illegal substances. Quinlan is troubled at what she knows, but questions how he figured out that Adaku was Kalu Danjuma's daughter. Pacho expresses how that was one reason why he had to leave. no longer respected his father and wanted to safely look into Adaku without endangering himself and his family, revealing that he hired a PI to look into Adaku's past and uncovered that she was the secret daughter of Kalu Danjuma. Knowing that her younger brother Zeke sells illegal substances, Quinlan asks if the organization uses kids to sell their product. Once Pacho confirms this, he states that if his father gets away with what he did to Elvira Russo, then he will do much more damage to many more people. Welcome to the 8th week of this year's In Times Like These recap. Now let's get into this. Starting with Devante Torres, who arrives at Russo Jewelers with his son Pacho to confront Isidore and his son Alan Russo over the online rant he made against Devante. As for Pacho, he's surprised to see Vivian Jones, whom he met on Valentine's Day. She's surprised as well and leaves the two families alone in Isidore's office. Pacho tells the Russos that Theodosius's palace is what benefits his family, stating how anything that happens to the hotel affects the entire family, stating how he won't allow them to destroy the hotel. Isidore tells Devante and Pacho how the meeting is pointless, demanding that they leave. Before they do so, Devante tells Isidore that if they make another step, then they have a war on their hands. Once they walk out, Isidore states that if it's a war Devante wants, then it's a war he'll get. Pacho pleads with his father not to retaliate, but Devante states how that's up to the Russos. As they walk out, Vivian sees them, especially with Pacho catching her eye. Raymond Dorval brings his grandchildren JJ and Vanessa to the hospital and meets with Shelley, asking her how Jeremiah is doing. Shelley informs the family that Jeremiah was hit pretty hard during the hit and run. JJ, who is stressed about what he's heard, informs his mother how he knows that she and Jeremiah have been receiving threats after overhearing her speak with Jeremiah. Raymond assures the family that the family will pull through. He points out that since everyone in the family knows what's going on, they need to stick together and pray. The Dorvals circle as they pray for Jeremiah's recovery and that God would protect them. Just as Finnegan Burke is on the phone with his lover Harley Drake, Quinlan Franklin walks into his office, asking the police commissioner what he knows about the Danjuma crime family. Confused, he asks the reporter if she's doing a story on the crime family, who he feels hasn't been relevant for over the past 10 years. She begins to reveal to Finnegan that Adaku is the daughter of the late Kalu Danjuma and that she took over the organization after Kalu passed away. He states how it makes sense as to why the substance use hasn't decreased, but increased, assuming that it was a rival organization that he just couldn't pinpoint. Quinlan explains that she certainly can't report on Adaku being Kalu's daughter, since Adaku is her boss, but that she could try to see if she can report on the drug usage in town. Finnegan questions if Adaku would greenlight it. Quinlan answers that it's worth a shot. Max receives texts from Yvette's Avenger, telling him to enjoy his last days of freedom. Soon, Johnny enters the room, and Max avoids looking at him. Johnny begins to wonder if Max is still upset over the fact that he's with Quinlan. Max tells his father how he's still upset about it, but tells Johnny how he's trying to get over it. Doing his best to communicate with his son, Johnny asks Max what's been bothering him, stating how he's been in a sour mood for over a week and barely speaking to anyone, and wonders if the trial is bothering him. Max reminds his father how it's still a he said, she said situation, and that he could still go to prison over Yvette's lies. Gianni tells Max that he has to be strong when the trial comes and not to feel defeated before a decision is even reached. Max questions if the decision will be reached when the jury sees him. Older, he's a guy, and the jury might just side with Yvette since she's younger and a small girl. All Gianni tells Max is that he needs to tell the truth, and Harley will handle the jury. Once alone, Max continues to read the text from Yvette's Avenger, stating that when Max is found guilty, there will be a huge celebration. When Quinlan walks into Adaku's office, Adaku asks Quinlan what she wants. Quinlan begins to explain how she's heard about the rise of substance use in Valley Park and wants to cover it. But Adaku denies the request, telling Quinlan that Devante's case is big news and will continue to be big news for months, asking Quinlan to just focus on that. After Adaku asks Quinlan to leave her office, Quinlan makes a call to Pacho, expressing how they need to talk. As Shelley stands by Jeremiah's side in the hospital, she sees him open his eyes. After telling her husband that she wasn't harmed after he was run over, Jeremiah asks Shelley if the kids know. She informs him how the kids have known all along. He apologizes to Shelley for not listening to her, understanding the mess that he has made for not telling the kids and not telling the police. She tells Jeremiah how he just needs to focus on getting better, expressing how thankful she is that he's still alive. He expresses how useless he feels being tied to a hospital bed while his family is in danger. Shelley reminds Jeremiah that she's capable of protecting the family while he's recovering. Most of all, Shelley states how they need to rely on God's protection. At the high school, Jay expresses to Vanessa how he can't believe that they're at school while their father is in the hospital. Vanessa reminds her younger brother how their mother wanted them to have a sense of normalcy. JJ reminds Vanessa how it's not normal to know that they have a target on their back. She points out how the police are looking into who ran their father over, telling him not to worry. Since the person who is after them hasn't been caught, JJ tells his sister how he can't help but worry. Vanessa reminds her younger brother that God will watch over them. JJ understands that, but states that it doesn't mean they should be sitting ducks. She begins to ask JJ what he plans to do. Frustrated, JJ states how he doesn't know, but knows that he can't sit around and do nothing. Reminding them of Papa's wisdom, Vanessa points out that JJ can pray, since that's all they can do at the moment. Ben Russo is surprised to see his younger brother Max in his office, asking why he's not at school. Max states how he didn't want to go. That piece of information is already clear to him, asking why he doesn't want to go to school. Max states how he didn't think he would get a lecture from Ben when he arrived. Ben assures his younger brother that he's not lecturing him, but warning him how skipping school won't help him win points with their parents, stating that when the school calls to tell them that he's not there, then they'll be worried. Max replies by telling Ben how he would know all about that. Understanding his brother's fear of the trial, he tries telling Max that he can't run away from his problems. The reply that Max gives is that Ben ran away from his problems by getting drunk and high. Ben asks Max if that's the road he wants to go down, warning his brother how that road only leads to pain. This causes Max to question why Ben relapsed on Christmas Day. Reluctantly, Ben admits to his younger brother that he felt an unexpected amount of pain and didn't want to feel any, acknowledging that he handled it the wrong way. Max wonders if AA actually helped him realize that, wondering if he never learned from the previous meetings. Ben states that when he picked up the bottle, he knew it was wrong, but didn't care. He goes on to tell Max how he has a bright future ahead of him, but has to fight his battles and not run away from them. What Max tells his brother is that he doesn't have the strength to fight. Even though Ben tries to assure Max that the family will stand by his side, Max states how the family can't secure his freedom. When the family visits Jeremiah, they're glad to see that he's getting better. Jeremiah expresses how grateful he is to be with them, then states how he needs to apologize. At first, Vanessa wonders what he has to be sorry for. Shelley adds that she and Jeremiah both need to apologize for not talking to them about the threats. Vanessa replies that she understands that they only wanted to protect them. Even though that's the case, Jeremiah and Shelley express how they shouldn't have kept them in the dark when they weren't oblivious like they thought, still wishing that both Vanessa and JJ would have told them what they already knew. Since the entire family is aware of what's going on, JJ asks his parents what the next step is. They reply that he and Vanessa don't need to worry about that, and that they know for sure that whatever happens next, God is still in control. Finnegan appears in Harley's hotel room at Theodosius's palace, but the adulterers are interrupted when Harley's son Alan knocks on her door. Alan questions if she's not happy to see him. Harley states how she's always happy to see him, but states how he didn't call to say that he was stopping by. Alan asks if that's such a surprise since they barely have spoken on the phone with one another, reminding her how she knows why. Harley understands, but Alan explains how that's what he'd like to talk about, asking his mother if they can speak in her room. Immediately, she tells her son no. Confused, Alan questions why. Lying to her son, Harley tells Alan that her room is messy, filled with scattered legal files, and that they can speak in the hallway. He tells his mother how he came to speak with her about Devante. Alan adds that she's still Devante's lawyer and shouldn't expect her to move out of the hotel, but tells his mother that he doesn't want Devante to get in the way of their relationship. Harley appreciates hearing that her son is willing to work things out. She goes on to tell Alan that she'll call him as soon as she cleans up her room. Once Harley goes back inside her room, Finnegan reveals that he heard everything, happy that she and Alan have made amends, but that it also seems like Alan would forgive her over anything. On the phone with Quinlan, Pacho asks her what she needs to speak about. She admits that she requested to Adaku about covering the rise of substance use. Pacho is angry that she took that risk, expressing how it was already a huge risk, telling Finnegan about Adaku, wondering if Quinlan wants a target on her back. Quinlan assures Pacho that Adaku wasn't suspicious, but states how Adaku shut her down and was adamant that she only focus on Devante. Pacho questions why Quinlan was trying to expose the rise of substance use in Valley Park. She answers that it would cause the public to wonder why there was such a rise in substance use after Kalu Danjuma's passing. But since Adaku dropped her request, she expresses how confused she is as to why she's so focused on placing Devante in the public eye when the two of them are supposed to be business partners. Pacho agrees, reminding her that Theodosius's palace has helped her product sales and knows that she'll lose a lot of money. He suggests that Adaku wants Devante out of the way to have Theodosius's palace all to herself. Quinlan agrees how that makes perfect sense, stating how she can't succeed. Pacho states how he still plans to let Devante hand him over the hotel and just needs to ensure that he continues to get close to Devante. Quinlan goes on to state how Adaku needs to be stopped before she has the chance to grow her organization. At the Russo estate, Gianni scolds Max, asking him what he thinks the court will believe if they find out that he's been skipping school. Once Gianni walks out of the room, Yulisa enters in, explaining that she heard some of the conversation. She wonders if he knows that the law could use the slightest bad decision against him. Max tells Yulisa that he doesn't need to hear her lecture. Yulisa states how she's only trying to help, wondering why it seems like Max no longer cares if he's found not guilty. Max states how he doesn't want to go to court. As soon as Yulisa tells him that she understands how scary it can be, Max states how he doesn't want to be at court and doesn't want to be here. Yulisa tries to tell Max that running away wouldn't do him any favors, reminding him how it didn't do JJ Dorval any favors. Max doesn't know how he can live on, knowing that he could go to prison and that could be the end of his future. She tries to assure Max that he doesn't know the future, but God does, encouraging him to rely on God. As for Max, he feels like he's done everything for God, even guilt over hooking up with Yvette, wondering if that's why God abandoned him. Yulisa tries to assure Max that God's arms are always open to those who come to him, sharing how different life, though it's hard, is with Jesus as her savior. She tries telling Max that being right with God isn't doing all the right things and what religion says, but getting to know God more. Even though Max understands that Yulisa is trying to help, he states how he doesn't want to hear it and would rather be alone. Once alone, Max calls someone asking how he can get in touch with Zeke Franklin, knowing that Zeke sells substances. Terry calls Isidore to tell him how she's at Theodosius's palace. Before he gets off the phone, he reminds Terry that he wants her to be convincing by showing emotion, expressing how they both know that showing compassion isn't her strength. Terry states that she has it handled, and then Devante approaches her. She tells Devante how she came to check up on him after hearing about Alan's online rant. Devante tells the doctor how Alan is just a reckless little boy who wants to run his mouth when he doesn't know what he's talking about. Terry questions if the live stream has affected the number of guests who have arrived at the hotel. He answers how the hotel business is tricky, but it's in his blood to handle bad press like this and make it profitable. In response to that, Terry tells Devante how she's willing to give a good word about the hotel to anyone she comes across. Terry states how she would have called to check up on him, but didn't know how to reach him. Devante begins to offer Terry a way of communication. She expresses how much she appreciates it. Once again, she calls Isidore to tell him that she's officially in. Quinlan arrives at Ben's office as he asks if she stopped by to ask if he's been attending his AA meetings and listening to their advice. She wonders how that is going. Instead of answering her question, Ben is certain that means she came in for something else, and then she tells Ben how Devante is more dangerous than he realizes, informing him that Adaku is Kalu Danjuma's daughter and that Devante is connected to her. He asks Quinlan what this has to do with him. Once again, Quinlan suggests that he hand Elvira's diary over to the police, believing that Pacho will have more than enough time to get close enough to Devante for Devante to hand Theodosius's palace over to him. Just like last time, Ben rejects the request. Quinlan, once again, reminds Ben how the diary could prove that Devante was lying and that Elvira wasn't the seducer. Ben replies that anyone with common sense would be able to see that. She states how the diary is the closest thing to physical evidence, asking him why he would risk losing this opportunity. He answers that once the police get a hold of Elvira's diary, then there is a huge chance that they would keep it forever, explaining how he already lost his aunt and won't lose the only thing he has left of her. Quinlan tries to express how she understands. Interrupting her, Ben tells Quinlan that she doesn't understand, reminding her how he really thought she did. But that changed when he found out that she was his father's mistress, asking her to leave and not ask about Elvira's diary again. Vivian enters Lorenzo Russo's office to hand him his coffee, which he appreciates, then sees that she's got a lunch of her own. She expresses that she ordered nachos for lunch. This causes Lorenzo to smile and mentions that nachos were his late daughter, Elvira's, favorite. Vivian tells her boss that the photos she saw of Elvira were beautiful, asking Lorenzo to see a photo of Elvira on his phone, which he happily agrees to do, reminiscing about his late daughter. He goes on to say how she would have been a good mother, seeing how she always took care of Benedict. But she was robbed of that chance. Vivian reminds Lorenzo that Devante Torres will stand trial and that Elvira will get justice. Even though that's true, Lorenzo understands how it won't bring Elvira back so that he can tell her how much he loves her, explaining that he told Elvira to behave herself, and wishes that he had the chance to tell his only daughter how much he loved her. Vivian tries to remind Lorenzo how he had no idea that would be the last time he saw Elvira. Before he gets emotional, Lorenzo appreciates the chance Vivian gave him to reminisce about Elvira, telling her that she can leave his office. Once he's gone, Vivian looks at a picture of Elvira, and it's revealed that she is Lorenzo Russo's illegitimate daughter. At the high school, Max approaches Zeke, who is surprised that he's taking the risk to buy substances from him with the trial coming up. Max expresses how he doesn't need Zeke to worry about that, but to sell him one specific product and wants all that he has. Zeke goes on to ask Max if he's ever bought substances before. Once again, Max tells Zeke that he's asking too many questions and can go somewhere else. Even though Zeke doubts that, Zeke hands Max the substances, asking him not to be stupid. Without saying another word, Max walks off. Then Yvette Mitchell approaches Zeke, asking him why he spoke with Max Russo. Max makes a call to Heidi, who asks Max what's wrong. He tells Heidi how sorry he is. Heidi asks if Max is apologizing for skipping school the other day. Max tells Heidi how he's always wanted to make her and Gianni proud of him. She tells her son that she is proud of him and that his father is proud. Max tells his mother bye and states that he loves her. Heidi lets Max know that she loves him too, and once the call ends, Yvette approaches Max, asking him why she saw him with Zeke Franklin. When Max tells Yvette that she shouldn't be seen with him, she expresses how Max isn't the sort of guy to hang around someone like Zeke Franklin. Max replies how that's none of her business, but wishes her the best in life, walking off, causing Yvette to be confused. Once school is finished, JJ and Vanessa are about to get on the bus, just as JJ explains that he needs to take a bathroom break. When Vanessa asks JJ if he can't wait, JJ asks his sister if she wants to risk him having an accident on the bus with her next to him. Disgusted, Vanessa tells JJ to hurry up, expressing how she can't wait to get her license. As soon as JJ goes into the bathroom, he sees Max in a zombie state, then is even more troubled when Max collapses. Welcome to the 9th week of this year's In Times Like These recap. Now, let's get into this. Starting with Wanda Mitchell, who gets a surprise visit from Owen Grant, who asks her why they haven't hung out lately. Wanda informs him that she doesn't want to give her family the wrong idea, revealing how Yvette and Udell worried that she and Owen had a thing for each other. But she explains that she still appreciates the friendship they have. Shelley Dorval visits her husband Jeremiah in the hospital, but suddenly they receive an unwanted visit from Devante Torres. The couple asks Devante to leave, but he asks if the police have any leads on who ran Jeremiah over. They tell Devante how that's none of his business, asking him to leave once again. Before Devante heads out, he warns Jeremiah and Shelley to watch their backs. Once Devante is gone, Shelley expresses to her husband how she believes that Devante was the one behind the threats and the hit and run, since they didn't stand by Devante's side when he was charged with taking Elvira Russo's life. Quinlan Franklin calls Pacho Torres, informing him that she told Ben the truth about Adaku Danjuma. Pacho isn't pleased to hear this, but Quinlan tries to tell Pacho how he can trust Ben, explaining that Ben has the only piece of evidence that could put his father in prison, which is Elvira's diary. When Pacho asks Quinlan why Ben hasn't turned the diary over to the police, she informs him that the diary is the only thing he has left of his late aunt. As for Pacho, he hopes that Ben changes his mind and turns the diary into the proper authorities. Realizing that her younger brother JJ is taking too long in the high school bathroom, Vanessa Dorval knocks on the door, telling JJ to get out. When he doesn't respond, Vanessa gets concerned. She rushes into the bathroom, seeing JJ in shock, noticing that he wet himself, and Max unconscious on the floor with substances next to him. She begins to ask JJ what happened, as he's unable to answer. Vanessa rushes to Max's side, performing CPR as she asks her younger brother to get help. JJ continues to remain still. Then she makes it clear that if Max doesn't get help fast, then he could lose his life, pleading with JJ to snap out of it. JJ eventually starts to snap out of it and calls for help as Vanessa pleads with Max to stay alive. Once the ambulance carries Max away, JJ asks his older sister if she thinks that Max will make it. She answers that she doesn't know, expressing that she had no idea Max was experimenting with substances. At Valley Park Memorial Hospital, Gianni and Heidi frantically arrive and hear from Dr. Terry Burke about how Max overdosed. JJ and Vanessa arrive, confirming Terry's statement. Hearing the news troubles Heidi and Gianni. The parents are even more troubled to find their youngest son lying unconscious. At Theodosius's palace, Pacho tells Devante that he has a question for him. Once Devante asks Pacho what the question is, Pacho asks Devante if he has any plans if he goes to prison. Confused, Devante asks his son where this is coming from. Pacho expresses how the trial will be here before they know it, and for the sake of the family, he needs to know what Devante has in place to make sure that everyone is taken care of. Devante tries to encourage Pacho to stay positive and fight to keep his freedom. Once again, Pacho reminds his father how the result of the trial is out of their hands and that they need to plan out what happens in case they don't get the result they hope for. Right after Pacho makes this statement, Nichelle appears, asking her older brother why he's sounding so negative. Pacho claims that he's not being negative, but he's being realistic. Devante replies that the facts are that he didn't take Elvira's life and that he has a good lawyer to prove it, especially since there's no physical evidence against him. Even though Pacho states that Devante could still have a motive, Nichelle asks Pacho what the motive could have possibly been, since it didn't seem like Elvira was going to expose their affair to anyone. One last time, Pacho states how the family needs to prepare for the worst. As for Devante, he tells Pacho how he's working hard to make sure that the worst doesn't happen. At the Dorval estate, Shelley and Vanessa asks JJ if he's sure he's okay. JJ tries telling his mom that he's fine, but she states that what he saw was troubling. Annoyed, JJ asks if he's supposed to feel as disturbed as her just because he's schizophrenic. Shelley tries to assure her son how that's not the case. Then Vanessa reminds JJ how they could have witnessed Max take his final breaths. JJ replies how they didn't. Then Vanessa reminds him how hard it was for him to snap out of it, which Shelley didn't realize. Angered, JJ asks Vanessa why she had to mention that. Vanessa apologizes, stating how it just slipped out. Shelley, wanting the truth from Vanessa, asks her daughter how JJ seemed when she found him in the bathroom. Reluctantly, Vanessa admits that JJ wouldn't respond to her, believing how that could have just happened to anyone. Before Shelley has the chance to say anything, JJ tells Vanessa how he's not just anyone, walking off. Vanessa tries to keep JJ in the room, but Shelley allows him to have time alone. Vanessa expresses that even though she felt like Max was guilty of what he allegedly did to Yvette, the last thing she wanted was to see him lose his life. In response, Shelley consoles her daughter. Heidi sorrowfully sits by Max's side as Johnny asks his wife if she wants anything. She tells Johnny how she wants to turn back the clock and ensure that Max never felt this sort of pain. As soon as Johnny tries to assure Heidi that their son will pull through, she tells Johnny that Max wouldn't be in this position if someone had been keeping an eye on him as they should have. Irritated, Johnny begins to ask Heidi what she's trying to imply. She goes on to state that after she was kicked out of the estate, Max started skipping school and experimenting with substances, assuming that Quinlan must have been distracting him from his responsibility. Angered, Gianni advises Heidi to remember exactly why she's no longer living in the estate. This causes them to blame each other, bringing up their affairs. Then Ben walks in, scolding his parents for fighting, while Max is fighting for his life. Embarrassed, Gianni and Heidi apologize, appreciating Ben for stopping by. He begins to ask what happened. Once he's informed that Max overdosed, Heidi tells Ben how he should take a wild guess as to where he got it. Ben immediately storms off, causing Johnny to ask what that was about. At Quinlan's apartment, she gets word that there was an overdose at the high school. Just as she begins to ask Zeke about the situation, the door knocks. Immediately, Ben barges in and pins Zeke against the wall. Wanda arrives at the Mitchell estate, ready to pick Yvette up to spend time at the apartment. As soon as Yvette sees her mother, Lorenzo Russo angrily walks in, asking the Mitchells if they're happy that they pushed Max to the edge. Of course, the Mitchells have no idea what Lorenzo is talking about. He angrily informs them that Max is in the hospital. Shocked, Yvette asks Lorenzo what happened to him. Lorenzo reveals that Max had just overdosed, shocking Yvette. In response, Udell and Wanda remind Lorenzo how Max's older brother is an addict and most likely picked up those bad habits from him. This angers Lorenzo even more, wondering if they don't care if he has almost lost another member of his family. Even though Wanda and Udell express how that's the last thing they wanted, they still feel like Max is responsible for his own choices. Angered, Lorenzo warns the Mitchells that if Max doesn't make it out of this coma, then they will face his wrath. Once Lorenzo walks off, Yvette is troubled, expressing how this is all of her fault. Wanda and Udell try to assure Yvette that what happened to Max wasn't her fault, but she's adamant that she wants to drop the charges. As soon as they tell Yvette that, even though Max has been seriously hurt, Max needs to pay for his crimes, Yvette tells them how Max never forced himself on her. Yulissa Torres is on the phone with Vanessa, telling her friend how she heard that she and JJ found Max, wondering how Vanessa and JJ are doing. Then Yulissa asks if Vanessa finally believes that Max has been innocent all along. The response which Vanessa gives is that even though she was troubled to see Max like that, it doesn't erase her feelings about his guilt. Frustrated, Yulissa tells Vanessa how she hasn't seen how defeated and depressed he has been lately. According to Vanessa, that's only a sign of a guilty conscience. As for Yulisa, she feels like it was a call for help which was overlooked, explaining that Max was trying to take his own life purposely. Even though Vanessa feels bad that Max felt like he needed to choose that path, it seems clear to her that Max couldn't handle facing the consequences of his actions. Yulisa questions if she would have thought Max was innocent if he fought the charges. Vanessa tells her friend that the bottom line is that Max needs to face the consequences of his actions and get the help he needs. Yulisa agrees that Max needs help, but tells Vanessa how she needs to recognize the factors that led Max to try to take his own life, the pressure of the charges, and the personal attacks against him. Just because Vanessa recognizes those factors, she expresses how that still doesn't make Max innocent. Before ending the call, Yulisa tells Vanessa that just like how she prayed for her salvation, she'll be praying that Vanessa sees the truth and also prays that God comforts her for the guilt she'll feel once the truth is fully exposed. Alan and Clarice arrive at the hospital to visit Max. Heidi and Gianni give them time with Max. Once the two of them are outside of the room, Gianni reminds Heidi how she told Ben to take a guess as to who sold the substances to Max, wondering what she knows. She tells Gianni how he should ask his new girlfriend. Annoyed, Gianni tells his wife how he's in no mood for games, asking Heidi what this has to do with Quinlan. Heidi informs Gianni that Quinlan's younger brother Zeke is a dealer and is 100% certain that Zeke sold substances to their son. Gianni is in disbelief. Then Heidi tells her husband how she has no reason to lie. She goes on to tell her husband that she'll ensure that Zeke pays for almost costing their son his life, then wonders if he'll end his relationship with Quinlan. Gianni answers that Quinlan isn't responsible for her brother's actions. Heidi reminds her husband that Quinlan is Zeke's guardian and that she knew what he was up to and did nothing, which allowed their son to be harmed. She adds that Gianni needs to decide whose side he's on, Quinlan's or Max's. Feeling like Ben is gonna beat him up anyway, Zeke tells Ben that no one forced Max to take substances. Ben tells Zeke that he gave Max everything he needed to take his own life, which almost happened. Quinlan tells Ben how she'll handle this. He tells Quinlan how she had a lot of chances to handle it, but was too focused on other matters instead of putting her brother in his place. She apologizes, pleading with him to let her handle it. Reluctantly, Ben releases Zeke. Once Ben leaves, Zeke asks Quinlan why she would tell Ben about the dealing. Angrily, Quinlan tells Zeke how she needed to in order to get Ben to convince Heidi to drop the charges against him, but tells Zeke how he screwed everything up by almost taking her son's life, fearing that she'll come after him, especially since she broke up her marriage to Gianni. Zeke tells Quinlan how Heidi can't charge him without any proof. Quinlan agrees, telling Zeke to flush everything. Appalled, Zeke tells Quinlan how she should know, more than anyone, how dangerous that is. When Quinlan asks her brother to expound on that, he tries to keep silent. Once Quinlan persists, he tells Quinlan how he knows that Adaku is the big boss, due to Devante's connection, explaining how Devante didn't want him to be with Nichelle to begin with. After hearing the truth, Quinlan tells Zeke to turn himself in and make a deal. Confused, Wanda and Udell ask Yvette what she's talking about. Yvette admits that she lied about the whole thing and that Max never forced himself on her. She goes on to say how she didn't mean for things to get this far. Angered, Wanda tells Yvette that it's taking everything inside of her not to slap her across the face. Yvette explains that she didn't think that Max would go to prison. Furious, Wanda tells her daughter that's why they got the police and the legal system involved. Before Wanda has the chance to say another word, Udell asks their daughter why she lied. Yvette begins to say how scared she was when they found the condom, worried that she would be punished. Udell tells Yvette that their next step is to get the charges dropped. Sorrowfully, Yvette walks off. Once Wanda is left alone with Udell, she expresses how she can't believe that she allowed something like this to happen, troubled by the misery she caused the Russos. Udell tells Wanda not to blame herself, stating how he allowed himself to be fooled, also allowed their daughter to be sexually active under their nose. Udell assures Wanda that Yvette will be protected. They embrace, look into one another's eyes, and kiss. At Russo Jewelers, Vivian, who was revealed to be Lorenzo Russo's illegitimate daughter, pops into Lorenzo's office, asking how he is since Max was in the hospital. Lorenzo responds that he's grateful that Max is still alive and states that he just needs to pull through. Vivian hopes for the same, expressing how she hopes that he gets the help he needs. She also tells Lorenzo how she's glad that he didn't have to experience that sort of pain after experiencing the pain of losing one child. Lorenzo replies that he would never want either of his sons to face pain like that, which is why he was so hard on Ben, because he didn't want him to go down a destructive path. Before Vivian walks out of Lorenzo's office, she claims that Max and his family are in her thoughts, telling him that her parents are people of faith, which he appreciates. When she leaves, she tells herself that just because her mother is a woman of faith doesn't mean she is. Though she hates how Max isn't doing well, she's glad that it's an opportunity to get close to her family and earn her birthright. At Owen Grant's office, he sees the Mitchells enter in, asking them what's wrong. Yvette tells Owen that she's dropping the charges. This causes Owen to question if Yvette wants to press charges because Max is in the hospital after overdosing, expressing that just because he almost lost his life doesn't absolve him of his crimes. Yvette replies that all she wants to do is drop the charges, thanking Owen for being her supporter. Before they all leave, Wanda states how she needs to stay for a bit. Once Udell and Yvette leave, Owen asks Wanda what's going on. She explains that this was unexpected, telling Owen that she does appreciate all that he's done for her, informing him that she's also in the process of moving out since she and Udell are working on their marriage. He wonders what that means for their friendship. Wanda tells Owen that she'll still be his friend, explaining that once she has all of her things moved out, she'll tell him goodbye, but will always be in touch. Back at the estate, Wanda informs her husband of what she told Owen. Since the couple have forgiven one another, Udell reminds his wife that Yvette needs the both of them if the Russos are going to take their revenge. Before Quinlan arrives at work, Gianni pays her a visit. He tells her how she never called him about Max. She tells him how she wanted to give him some time. Gianni responds by asking if she's been avoiding him because her younger brother was the one who gave his son substances. Quinlan apologizes to Gianni about what happened to Max, which causes him to ask why she hasn't turned Zeke in. She reminds Gianni how Zeke is everything that she has left. Gianni reminds Quinlan how Max almost lost his life because of her brother and doesn't want to see him get away with anything. Most of all, he doesn't want her to protect Zeke. Quinlan replies that she will do whatever it takes to protect Zeke, stating how clear it is that she failed him. He reminds Quinlan that Zeke is responsible for his own actions and that he needs to face the consequences of those actions. She explains that Zeke will, but to let her handle it. This causes Quinlan to wonder what this means for them. Gianni answers that he doesn't know, then leaves. Finnegan Burke is surprised when Heidi walks into his office and is even more surprised when she informs him that Zeke Franklin sold substances to Max. Upon hearing this, Finnegan asks Heidi how she's so sure. The reply she gives is that he's the only dealer at the school she could think of. Puzzled, Finnegan reminds Heidi that she dropped the charges against Zeke. She tells Finnegan how there were complicated factors which made her decision, telling Finnegan that he wants this done as soon as possible. He begins to ask Heidi where her proof is. Heidi answers that she doesn't need physical proof. Once Finnegan tells Heidi how he needs to play this smart. She questions why. Finnegan reveals to Heidi that Adaku Bello is Kalu Danjuma's daughter. Upon hearing this information, she tells Finnegan that she knows exactly what to do. After school is over, Heidi confronts Zeke. Trying not to look scared, Zeke asks Heidi what she wants. She replies that she wants him to pay for what he did to her son. Can't get enough of the crazy world of In Times Like These? Then, treat yourself to a binge watch of In Times Like These. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. You're not ready for what's to come, but tune in anyway.